Ba-dum. Bum ba bum ba ba da de dee. Ya da 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 dum bum ba. Yum ba dum da 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 do. Da 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 dum bum be. Hello everyone, how are we doing? Hello. Wow, that's gone jazzy. What have I knocked? It didn't look this jazzy a while ago. Let's see. That's gone up by an angle. Okay. That's it. That looks a bit better. Not sure what happened there. Oh well. Hello, hello, hello. Hello, how are you all doing? Let's see. Make sure that's on live chat. And yeah, it's not that cold. I can survive without. And this last one. There it is. Right, I do apologise. I'm going to apologise now up front. There was supposed to be videos I was going to record yesterday to get a head start on videos because it's 18 videos I need to have recorded before I go away in June. And honestly, I was supposed to get 2 done yesterday, but instead I spent the day having my teeth done. Don't worry, I'm going to have the gun done again later, not this week, but a week after. Sometimes. I'm having instead of having the tooth removed, this is the thing you can do in the UK, you can occasionally get sent to a let's say a more specialist dentist, a dentist who focuses on actually just doing things like the major operations far more than they do the day-to-day checks. And I went to this dentist and the dentist went, I can save that. It's a fairly good tooth. I don't see the point in extracting that, and you appear to be perfectly fine with me sticking stuff down your throat. Which I was sort of going, not really keen on anyone sticking stuff down my throat, but fine. I never really had a massive objection to it. I just don't enjoy it as an activity. And yeah, so now I'm having a root canal. And apparently getting a crown. When I asked if it would be gold and have jewels in it, I was told that that wasn't that kind of crown. Which I found a little bit disappointing, I have to say. Just a little bit. Anyway, hope you're all well. That was a bit of a wittering introduction, but hope you're well. Formula 1 is on apparently at the moment. Well, I've got Hotspur, and I've got a book which is, well, let's put it this way. It has been unboxed in the extent I opened it to check it was the right one, that was the one that was supposed to arrive had arrived. And it's going to be something which you're all going to be rather interested in, but it's going to wait for a bit for that one. Those are the new books I have today. Today's theme is leadership, mainly because I felt like talking about leadership because it keeps coming up as a tangential topic in things I'm doing. So it seemed appropriate. Hello M35 Benedids, hello Nazi Chivalry 1, hello Peter Dawson, hello Geo Guy, hello Carl Van Gensberg, hello Sage, hello John Shea, hello Bob Fry, hello DG40, hello Desert Foxo, hello Wayne Boring, hello Seneca Nero, hello Matthew Donald, hello Yickers, hello Anna Roger Paul, hello Steve Richards, hello Tanner Felker, hello, and Colin Cameron, hello. Derp Squad, hello. Ben Stewart, hello. They call them orthodontists here. We just call them dentists, and we call them a dentist of a higher power. But they're scary. Bob Fry, my suspicious mind wonders why the Russians would put a recovery ship in a war zone if Moscow had only conventional weapons. I think the answer to that is no, she didn't have only conventional weapons. And let's be honest, the depth she's at, the only reason you'd be trying to do any recovery is just to check that no one can recover those sorts of things. She's either got equipment on her which is very sensitive, which is default, but there again, we all know that she has had problems with her upgrades, in that the money for the upgrades, instead of being spent on upgrades, went on giving people lovely daches and holiday homes and chalets and things in, well, mostly in Switzerland. And probably a few ones in London High Street as well. But, you know, life happens. Hello, Ian Winter. Cody Dunsman. Hello. That's exceptional. Why did Rodney use the same approach as Hood? Did Rodney use the same approach as Hood? And Bismarck's guns couldn't kill Rodney, could she? No, Bismarck's guns couldn't have killed Rodney. Honestly, this is the thing I get back to whenever we start talking about Rodney and Nelson. If the Royal Navy are producing fast capital ships, battle cruisers, and suddenly they go, oh, we have to build battleships. And I put all the blame at Beatty, all the blame on Beatty, because he's the first Sea Lord, he's the one in charge of reading the frickin' tea leaves. And in the nicest way, they should have gone, well, how fast do we need these ships to be? And I don't think you would have seen that much drop in armour or that much drop in capability or survivability of ship for 28 knots. I really don't. And seeing as they were 33,800 tons rather than 35,000 tons standard, and I know that's using water armour and all sorts of things, but if they used the extra 1,200 tons and, I don't know, being prepared to accept marginally less armour, I think they could have made them 28-knot ships. And if they had 28-knot, if Rodney and Nelson had been 28-knot ships, the odds are, in the nicest way, that instead of all the effort being put on Hood, Renown, and Repulse being the fast ships in service, Rodney and Nelson would have been two more fast ships in service. The Queen Elizabeth might well have been upgraded to 28 knots as well to keep up with them. And that could have led to a very, very different scenario. So we can put all the blame for Hood and for Bismarck finding itself fighting a battle cruiser, an unmodernized battle cruiser at that, at the seat of the guy who was first Sea Lord for most of the 1920s. There's also King Alexander Clarke when? Ooh, that sounds like far too much paperwork. I'll take, Archduke. Make there be a nice king and queen in charge of things, and I'll just have all the power and none of the responsibility. And Crown Prince is just far too complicated. You might actually end up having to inherit the paperwork. Hello, DH89. Happy Sunday to you. Let's hear every one. Well, reading D.K. Brown's Rebuilding Royal Navy, it appears the British plan to modernise all their World War II armoured carriers. Ambitious? Too ambitious? No, it was very sensible at the time. And if they'd taken a more sensible approach when doing Victorious, it would have probably worked. So, what kind of river monitor would you build for Ukraine in the current war? Well, you can't build something that's submersible because the rivers aren't that deep for most of their river. So you need something that's shallow draft. And that means you either have to make it small and light so you can build in numbers, so losses won't affect your overall operations, although you don't want to lose anyone, of course, or incredibly heavily armoured and very powerful. I think I'd go for small and light, and I think I'd probably build something with... if I could get it, a 105mm gun and something like CAM or something, surface-to-air missiles, or maybe something with 30mm cannon and anti-tank missiles and, well, no. Basically, you want anti-tank missiles, mortar, anti-aircraft missiles, and a 30mm cannon, is broadly speaking what you would want a pool of firepower to come from. You might well decide that all the ships will carry anti-aircraft weapons, all the ships will carry a 30mm, and they'll either carry a mortar or anti-tank missiles. But they'll need to be light and small. We're talking... CB90 sort of level. Hi, Jengov. Vision, my sympathy for your teeth. I get to visit the surgeon tomorrow for a post-operation checkout. Checkup. Ouch. How bad is it if Chemist Turpitz is destroyed in her fitting out basin to the point that she is scrapped, as in whales have wings? Volume 1. Royal Navy Air Raid on Wilhelmshaven does that. Reading Whales Wings Volume 1. Would the Gloucester F534 have been a better fighter than what they had with its 8 7.7mm Browning machine guns? Theoretically, but that's a theoretical. And as for... I'm not quite sure the 7.7 Browning would actually be that brilliant. We'll leave that to one side. As for if you... Again, it's taking down the enemy force. So the British always have to prepare for the worst case scenario, which is Germany brings out all their capital ships at once. They always have to be ready for that scenario. Because even with intelligence and all these things, you might not get. You never know. The Germans might be smart. They might change all their codes, and they might actually do things about sending long signals over long communication signals, which don't start with "Hail Hitler" every single time. And there is always the possibility, therefore, you could theoretically, when they're all around, get Scharnhorst, Gneisenau, Bismarck, and Tirpitz coming out at the same time. However, once you've sunk Bismarck, Gneisenau is in for its gun upgrade, which never really happens. If Tirpitz was no longer there, all there would be was Scharnhorst, and we know what happens when there's only Scharnhorst. Eventually, she gets caught out when she's off for a soiree and gets killed as well. Basically, any cut down in force cuts down the necessary force the Royal Navy needs to maintain to watch it. Nathan Cook, new book. Yes, there are some new books today. Colin Cameron, was it a dental hospital? No. It was a... Technically, I think at the moment I'm having to go private because I wanted it done before I went to Canada. For some reason, I didn't fancy the odds of having to fly across to Canada and then have something go wrong while I was out there. And despite starting in January, it took ages to actually get anything arranged. Cool, Vision. Oh, well, look, we'll look forward to seeing you there. Yes, I have seen Safford. I have looked at the suggestions on Discord, and I will again go through this. Is that if anyone's wondering, Stafford is taking on, along with I think he's being helped by Wayne as well, with plotting together and putting together the Canadian dinner for for basically any fans who want to come and have dinner with me and Drac. That was announced in the last couple of videos. Well, the last live and the long patrol for it, the Malta one. They are organising it. I'm sure they'll pick a lovely place. Please do get in contact on Discord and make sure there's a list put together so we can organise. Well, so they can organise and put it together and work it out. And I'm going to say thank you to them. And I think I'm getting sent lists of suggestions of eateries, and we'll work it out. Don't forget the mid-ranking people who took their cut to Cyprus and a lot of other people who took their cut to St. Petersburg. No, more than likely. Hi, Wayne Boring. Let's see, Alex. Even if none of the money was spent on the yachts, the Russian military is so heavily underfunded that it's terrifying. Yeah, but I'm now starting to look at some of the Chinese officers I know and some of the things they've procured over the years, and I'm wondering whether there is similar going on. McDevitt. Goes good. Can't get into the Patreon Discord link. Linked Patreon, but it didn't work. Should be if you, Glenn, and this is to everyone. If you go down below on this video, you should find a link to Discord down below, which should work and should take you. It should be down in the description of the video below here. So, MV Eclipse seems to have gotten the air defense network that was designed for Moscow. That's interesting. In Sterling, would a river monster be much use? I think it'd be more useful now. I don't think it would have been as useful in the northern campaign, but I think in the southern campaign, having river and coastal monitors that can dash up and down the coast and can go up and down the rivers could be useful as an extra aspect of maneuver to counter the Russians, especially if they would suddenly appear and cover river crossings. Oh. Colonel Goswick, the 120 minute to finish Amos is a nice one. It's a very nice one. Jiga, could the Ukrainians do something like the Japanese Shinyan or Kaiten, except using automation or Italian type attack on Alexandria? They could do. They could do some very interesting things. You have to remember the Ukrainians have an advantage. Most of them can, a large number of them can look and speak Russian fluently. If I was Russia, there would be no foe I'd be more worried about facing in a covert war, which this could descend into quite easily, than that. Especially now they've exported a whole load of Ukrainians internally. They've basically created a displaced population which could provide people who will support that. And they know that, because they're not stupid. Or if they don't realise that, then they are really stupid and deserving what they're finding, or what's coming their way. How did they just sail Admirals coordinate their fleet, especially if it was made up of several different types of ships? Well, they had a sort of a pace advantage. Things were slower, but it was flag signals. It was a series of flag signals, pre-arranged signals, and often going to meetings aboard ships and rowing. The boats would be lowered, they'd row off to meet on the Admiral's flagship and, get together, have a discussion, planned it out that way. But also, you have to remember the captain's old phrase was the master under God. And if you're the master under God of your ship, you can do what you want to do. I think I might have had a cake delivery. I say this with reason. There might be a cake delivery. After all, I need to eat soft food at the moment. Very soft, so cake it is. Thank you. No cake delivery. Cruelty. Cruelty to brothers going on here. Cruelty to brothers. Hello. And before you understand those weird maneuvers, I've got a pile of books sitting next to me. Right, first off, Iron Brogue. Good luck with your brother Shogun. Right, Dirt Squad, and good luck with the book too. Dirt Squad. Corruption is endemic in the Chinese military procurement system. Yeah, that's starting to look like it might be the case. But you can't rely on corruption getting you what you want. Because corruption doesn't always necessarily mean everything is going to fall apart. For example, let's be honest, the British procurement system for much of the Napoleonic Wars and various other things through the Age of Sail was not in any way, shape, or form pristine. There was masses of areas of corruption. And yet the British managed to keep the corruption under control just enough that they managed to survive. And you can almost argue that's the whole reason the Dutch managed to do the whole attack up the Thames and the Battle of Medway scenario is thanks to corruption. So, yeah. Oh, cakes arrived. Right, so today's theme is leadership, and hence answering questions on corruption seems rather sensible because corruption is, by definition, the absence of proper leadership. But, Bishop, the Buffalo Naval Park has a USN River patrol boat from Vietnam. USN had quite a riverine flotil in Vietnam. Oh, they did. Oh, those PBs. Mm-hmm. Halaman 6040. And before anyone asks, cakes. Nice and soft for my teeth. Dietrich 9, does the current German Baden-Württemberg class strike you as unarmed? Seems also to lack any true role to justify the cost. There are so many problems with that class. If I got into it, I would be here all night discussing that class. PBRs. Right, so, as we're doing leadership, let's start off with the 1944 definition of leadership. And I love these little series of books. This is the Royal Navy's Officer Pocket Book, 1944, London. It's reprinted. It's got this in the front, which is a destroyer. And this one is published by Conway Press. When did they republish them? Not that long ago. I think it was republished in the 2000s. But it's got all sorts of little handy things in here, and it's a very good remaking of the traditional pocketbook, the traditional officer's handbook, which was given to junior officers to tell them what to do. And it has a definition of leadership in it, which I tend to refer to. Leadership is the one attribute which is common and necessary to all who wear the uniform of an officer in His Majesty's forces, whatever their technical qualifications. It is also the one attribute which cannot be learnt in a classroom or from a textbook. An inexperienced officer can assimilate a reasonable amount of technical knowledge through the medium of tuition and textbooks, which can be increased by experience. That is a comparatively simple procedure by contrast with attaining the art of leadership, which rests so much with the personality of the individual concerned. Some are born great. To them, the ability to lead presents no difficulty. Others have greatness thrust upon them. Some of these have latent powers of leadership, and others have these powers to a limited extent only, which is a worry to them. To develop the first essential leadership, which is self-confidence, must be a matter of practical experience, possibly painful to endure, demanding courage and the will to avoid the shadow and to come out into the light. Never forget that ratings have a few rights, but they definitely have got a right to good officers. Never forget that the ratings have few rights, but they definitely have got a right to good officers. Now, I'll get into some of the things. Bearing an example. Be smart and alert in your bearing. And always be meticulous about your dress. Develop your voice and word of command. Your demeanor should be cheerful and enthusiastic. It is your business to inspire enthusiasm and pride of ship and service. Never appear bored or fed up, however irksome the work may be. The British have a capacity for cheerfulness and adversity. Give this a chance. It is infectious. Never allow panic to show in your voice or manner. There is an ever-present tendency in your men to turn to an officer for their cue in an emergency. Knowledge. Do not be too proud to study the seamanship manuals or other technical books. They are the teachings of many generations of experience. Do not despise advice tendered to you by your subordinates. On taking up a new job, keep your eyes and ears wide open, and unless and until you know something about it, your mouth shut. As leaders of fighting men, it is your business to do your utmost to acquire knowledge and to impart it. Never be afraid to ask questions. Bluff is a trait of a bad officer. Men quickly form a very shrewd opinion of your ability and of your capacity for just dealing. It is on that assessment that their readiness to follow your lead and to work with a will under you mostly depends. You cannot be just without knowledge. Loyalty. Loyalty can start only from the top and grow downwards. It can be checked or even destroyed by lack of strength in the link just above. Loyalty can flourish only when it acts both ways, i.e. be loyal to your inferiors as well as to your superiors. The former is often forgotten. Please note that I don't know about any of you, but I've always had the policy that if I'm in charge of people, I'm responsible for them. And if anyone above me has a complaint about the people below, they better go through me to complain about it and pass it through me, rather than going and taking it out on my subordinates, or they will get told off from me. Because it is not my subordinates' fault if they're not doing anything. That's a chain of command. They're mine. Not yours. They're mine. If you have a problem with them, you tell me off, and I will go deal with it. Or I will tell you to go and bugger off because, excuse the French there, because you haven't understood what they were doing, and therefore I shouldn't be telling them off in the first place. Which is more often the case, because anyone I'm in charge of tend to be bloody smart, very smart and very capable. Especially Justin Craig course assistants. I don't seem to get bad ones. Do not risk giving the appearance of washing your hands of responsibility or of giving a hint of criticism of higher authority. The popularity jack is soon discovered by the sailor and immediately loses grip. Do not discuss the failures of your young petty officers and men in the hearing of wardroom attendants or others on the lower deck. That is just as bad as admonishing a higher rating in front of his juniors. At the falters, do not lose an opportunity to speak in favour of a good man or a man's good qualities. This is not only injustice to the man, it is of importance to the captain or commander. On the other hand, do not whiten a sepulchre. Difficulties sometimes arise in your endeavour to support your petty officers. Like others, they are liable to make mistakes, and may wrongly bring up a man for punishment. Even so, it is rarely desirable to indicate publicly your displeasure. Never judge a man if you have lost your temper. I.e., if someone does something which really annoys you, take a step back, figure it out, and try and work out a way to not lose your temper at it. Word of command. A great deal can be gained by making a determined effort to improve the tone and delivery of your orders. This applies equally to seamanship and to parade ground orders, although the best manner of giving them each differs somewhat. Whenever you hear a strikingly good order, a few, have a gift for it, study it and mimic it. Many officers do not make themselves heard, a bad fault. The order, hoist away, can be given with every bit as much life and drive as can an order on the parade ground. Fill up your chest before giving an order, put enthusiasm into its tone, give it as if you meant it. The amount of grip which can be obtained by a good word of command is remarkable. Men cannot work at the rush to poorly given orders. The amount of strength of body and enthusiasm exerted by your men is in proportion to the grip of the person in charge, and their ability to enhearten them. This is a really good book. Okay, there is a lot of really cool history. There's a lot of really cool, interesting stuff in here. But also, there is a lot of leadership experience sitting in this book, which it's worthwhile getting hold of. And I can tell you, the current and most recent versions of this that are given out to officers to this day, yes, some of the phraseology has changed, but the timbre, tone, and the advice overall hasn't. Because it's good advice which has been paid for by many years. Okay. There are questions. Sim Richards, did freshwater capacity on the Isles really hinder their endurance in the Indian Ocean? Yeah, it did need to be upgraded. Honestly, their ability, basically, the thing is, the Isles needed a full upgrade, and they weren't supposed to. The Isles were supposed to be being replaced, remember? Basically, the Queens were being upgraded, apart from Royal Oak, she'd been upgraded. If Royal Oak had not been sunk in Scarpa Flow, you would have had a far better R class sitting in the Indian Ocean, because she would have been able to keep up. The fact is, the other R's didn't go through the upgrades. They didn't have the time to put them through the upgrades. They weren't considered valuable enough, because the amount of work needed to upgrade them to get them to a decent speed, etc., would have been prohibitive. It was easier to build a new ship, and probably more cost-effective. So they were supposed to be being replaced by the King George V's, and then the Lions were going to replace, to an extent, them, and probably Repulse. Although the Vanguard probably would have ended up replacing Repulse once they started organising them. Shomak, was corruption part of why officers had to pay so much of their ship's operations out of pocket? I.e., was this designed to short Phantom men from appearing? Stop. There are systems built into the British construction in this period to try and prevent that. Phantom crew were not something which was keen on. There were still captains who had Phantom crew, and it's how they supplemented their income, but it was found out quite quickly. There is some interesting things about some of the casualty lists in let's put it this way. There would sometimes be an admiral who would look at a captain and go, "So apparently you've lost 30. Look at their ship and go, "You haven't had a single ball strike. How the frick have you lost 30? Okay. But it was interesting sometimes. Seneca, can the ratings enforce their right to good leadership? There is the structure in the Royal Navy of divisions, which means you usually have your officer who's in charge of your unit, but you also have a divisional officer who will be something different, usually. So basically, you'll have your gun, your team, whatever, with an officer, and you'll have a divisional officer you can sort of go to. And there is also an informal network. And as I've discussed before, the captain's steward is a very important role in a ship. The captain's steward will often know exactly what's going on in both levels, and they will keep it very discreet. However, they will often inform the captain if there is something going on which the captain should know about, because they will be loyal to their ship and loyal to their crew. And if it's a good captain will encourage the loyalty of the steward. But it won't be so much as the steward will tell the captain something like, "Oh, so and so is a bad officer who's not doing their job." It'll be more a case of, there are some, there seem to be some interesting going-ons down in so and so section, sir. Or something like that, just in passing. Because the captain probably asks, "So how's the ship? I've managed to get out of the bridge, much off the bridge today. Oh, some interesting going-ons in so-and-so," at which point the captain will probably go, okay. Next morning, XO, or Jimmy, whatever, depending on what kind of vessel they're on. XO comes, looks at the captain and goes, "Yeah? What's going on in this section?" At which point the XO will walk down there and look at things quietly and go, Probably have a chat with a couple of chief petty officers, find out what exactly is going on, and try and deal with things in an educational manner before anything gets too problematic. Mike is clipping at the higher end. I try to stop it getting too loud. Keep your mouth shut. That would help so many senior NCOs. Yeah, I am starting to wonder if perhaps sections of this were written by senior NCOs. I think possibly it was. But the section on knowledge, it is going to sound strange, but if I was a senior NCO, I'd be almost tempted to take these pages 15 to 17 and 20 to... Ooh. Oh, good lord. It's an entire chapter. But let's be honest, pages 15 to 26 should be mandatory reading for all junior officers. It's supposed to be. It isn't. I think it is, broadly speaking, a variation in the Royal Navy still. Oh. That's what I was thinking. Of the procurement of destroyers and subs from a certain French shipyard into war period. Oh, caramba. Vintage card history. I once dressed down a shipmate for serious safety violation. He was a friend and I felt bad about it. Yet our chief PO saw it happen. I thought we were private and told me I'd handled it well. It's always better if you can dress them down quietly. People don't often like it, but again, this is something you have to watch when you're doing appears and how you do it. It's especially true, I have to say, in the experience I have most often when I'm dealing with, I have to sort of manage people, is if you consider the revision company I work for, I've got tutors who've been doing a topic for 30, 40 years. And they'll know physics or maths or biology, chemistry, whatever, far better than I ever will. History, politics, I can have an argument about the content with them. But then I have to watch the classes, and I have to try and head off any issues. So if I notice the class is being particularly dominated by one student who seems to be asking all the questions and all those things, I need to sort of find a way to go up to the tutor and go, "So, that Fred you have, he's a character, isn't he? Oh yeah, he gives us so much questions. It's really keeping the class going." "Yeah, I can see that. How's he at bringing other students in, though? Because, if he's got that much energy, he's a good... He should have good leadership skills. Be interesting, isn't it? It's something like that, usually, is what I go with. And if they don't take any notice, then it's a case of next version, it's a case of quiet conversation off on the side. Fred is basically running your class for you. Is there a reason for this? I've been doing this for 30 years. Yes, you have, but Fred is a lovely young man, and he's not a bad student in any way, shape, or form. Really nice, but the trouble is, every time I've gone through there, gone past your classroom, which has been about 6 times in the last period, because I was paying attention to it, Fred's been asking questions and talking away, dominating with you, and everyone else has been sitting there quietly looking bored. Oh. It's nice and it's wonderful to have a good student who's very keen. We all love them. But most of the time, it tends to be sorted out with the first comment. Most of the time. In winter, should be issued to MPs. Oof. I'm not expecting them to read it. And also, you have to remember, the thing I always point out, and the thing I worry about with most of the political class these days in most countries, is that it tends to come from the legal side. In that we oversample one particular area. It's as bad as when you end up with military dictatorships. Everyone comes from one pool of knowledge. And that doesn't help you have a well-rounded debate or even a well-informed debate. It means you just have people who are skilled at making a debate. Right, I've turned the microphone gain down. Melanie? I don't know where the high-pitched audio artifacts are. Vision, one of the best TNG scenes, yes, was acting Captain Data telling acting XO Worf not to criticise the decision in public on the bridge. Data told Worf this in the ready room in private. It was very good. Nathan Cook, worst naval leader in World War II? Oh. You all know who I'm going to say, Lord Corconori. There are others I could go for, but Lord Corconori is the one I'm going to go for. Mainly because I've been writing an article on the Norway campaign, and he's just been annoying me even more now. Come on, Gasberg. Were the Isles a bit wartime built? I less emphasis on them being able to keep it kept in peacetime service long, especially this long. Yeah, they were. They were building 8 of them, and they were. Everyone knew that the Queen Elizabeths were the first-rate battleships, and the Isles were pretty much the second rates compared to them. Which one? Crews of Phantom captains? Some crews might wish for one. Hi, Juicy Student. Hi, Darius Ransky. They fell overboard. Yeah, that might happen. Chief petty officers have a very good network. Again, there are many ways things can get to a captain's ears. Although, the story I often remember was told to me by a very senior retired Royal Navy officer. And he'd known there was something going wrong in an area. And he had a new steward, because the steward who'd served him for years on several deployments had retired from the service. And so he was assigned this new person. Young, it was their first tour, and they were doing well. But he noticed they started looking nervous. He didn't like it. I didn't think he was making them nervous, because he basically was treating them as if they were his youngest kid or something like that. That's the approach he decided to pick with him because of the age difference and because by that point he was a very senior officer. So he went hunting. He decided to go for a wander through a ship, which is something which senior officers in ships don't normally do, but, you know, he made sure he had a coat on him, which was sort of obscuring but not completely hiding his rank, so he didn't look like he was completely trying to be incognito. Anyway, he came across a junior officer telling off his steward in language which, to quote this officer, the senior officer, he felt was inappropriate and uncalled for. All I will tell you is this: the steward ended up having a long and very happy career in the Royal Navy. The junior officer was removed from the ship within 24 hours. Apparently, basically, moral of the story is: if they're the captain's steward, do not tell them, start trying to bully them, because even if they don't tell the captain, a good captain, or captain, or in this case, actually, it wasn't the captain's, it was an even more senior than the captain's steward. If they're a captain or senior officer's steward, and they're good at their jobs, you start bullying their steward, they will figure it out, and they will come hunting for you. And they will find you. Graham Hunt, you never tell off your immediate subordinate in public. Never. No. And as a rule, you never disagree with your immediate superior in public. Wait till you're in private. And also, a good advice for parents is try and avoid having disagreements about the children in front of the children. Wait till they're out of the way, then have the discussion. Always present a united front. Anak, always try to adhere to praise in public and admonish in private. If you can, yes. Vision. What is education next in the revision in the UK? In the UK, we often have, for exams and exam prep, people can go to tutors, one-to-one tuition, like that, but there are also revision companies, etc., which take over a school and basically run revision centres where you have 6 to 8 students in a class. And so compared to school, where usually there's 30 to 40 students in a class to a teacher, and maybe they'll have a teaching assistant, but it's rare, especially in secondary levels. You have a few days where you can get whilst not quite one-to-one tuition, definitely a big boost in being the tutor's concentration ability to concentrate on your specific needs. Helen Nook. Caught up to live, Doctor. Your speech suddenly slowed way down. I'm glad. Interesting. What was the cost difference between the Queen and Elizabeth? Was it cheaper as claimed when procured or phantom efficiency? Largely phantom efficiency in the end. Derek asks, senior retired RN officer Jingles? No, sadly I haven't yet met Jingles or chatted with him. This was a very senior retired officer. I would, let's put it this way, also one of the nicest officers, nicest people as full stop you'd ever meet. Really lovely. Went really very, very senior in the Royal Navy, and not someone I would have wanted to upset. Because if he ever did raise his voice, it would have been a very rare occurrence. Vintage Kaiser. My next ever with Graph and Stift. Book idea. Is it shelf material? Ooh. Graph and Stift. Send me a Discord question with that, and I will get the books out, and I'll send them through to you tomorrow. I'll need pictures of them. I said, oh, that sort of hunting. Yes. I'm not 100% sure, but considering who I was having the conversation with, I wouldn't be surprised if it was senior Royal Navy officer with probably senior Royal Marine NCO in attendance wandering with him, because that he was very good friends with an NCO in the Royal Marines, and he said who's also tended to be on the same ships. So I wouldn't be surprised. Graham Hunt, do you mean letters after name? Mm-hmm. Now. Finish research. I've heard Britain speak of various letter levels regarding education. What are they and what do they mean? Okay, so bachelor's, first level of university. That's a 3-year usually degree. 4-year if you've got in on a foundation year, or if you've got a year abroad. Masters, you do an extra year, usually of study, an extra dissertation, and doctorate or PhD is an extra 3 to 4 years after that if it's full time. All those are the full time figures. We do have some various gradings below that. A-level is usually your school leaver certificate, but there's also other qualifications which you can do now. They keep getting their names changed, helpfully. And the ones you take at 16 are GCSEs. And below that, you have, which are also, GCSEs are also sometimes referred to as Key Stage 4, which makes sense when you realise that L's can be referred to as Level 5, or Key Stage 5, and usually the first year of university is considered Key Stage 6, 7, and 8, and don't get me started on it. It gets fun. John Staff, I got kicked out of a bar in Liverpool as the chief of staff got frustrated at slow service and jumped over the bar and started to pour me and him some drinks. That doesn't surprise me. Hi, Sage. Good evening. I'm trying an experiment tonight, courtesy of the new Bluetooth headset. Doing the laundry while listening to you is like it's a podcast. Bear Squad, never underestimate the anger of a quiet person. All the energy that a loud person puts into being loud, a quiet person puts into getting a favourable outcome for themselves. Mm-hmm. Oh, and also there's the highers and lowers in Scotland. I've taught Scottish board, I've taught Welsh board, I've taught all the free boards, free main boards, and things. There's also the baccalaureate system. Basically, there's a whole range of different educational options depending on your needs. No, I got the impression it was Admiral some description. Yeah, he was at the time, and he got to an even more senior admiral before he left. Sim Richards, why did it take a long time to develop the 4.5 inch, the gun on the turret? The gun was actually fairly quick. It was developing the mount. The turret for the capital ships was available quite early on in the 1930s, and therefore was designed into ships and designed into rebuilds and into the carrier program. It became critical for the carrier program. Designing the mount for the destroyers and making sure it was stable, especially the double mount, took the time. Robert Roberts. Newbie question. I heard there is both a First Sea Lord and a First Lord of the Sea. Is that true? If so, to what for each sea? Okay, so let me explain. At long time ago, there was the First Lord of the Admiralty, who was in charge of the Admiralty. And then there were the Sea Lords, who were the senior naval officers. So there was the admin side, which was the Admiralty, and then there were Sea Lords. Now, the First Lord of the Admiralty tends to be a politician who then goes and sits in the House of Commons, or the House of Lords, depending on the time period, i.e. Winston Churchill was First Lord of the Admiralty. But at different times, the Lords of the Sea, the side Lords, have been called different things. They're being called Sea Lords or Lord of the Sea. There's also the Lord Admiral, which was a post which the Queen could appoint someone, and was based. It was in periods a very commanding role, in other periods a less so. Let's be honest, when Prince Philip had the rank, it was pretty scary because there was always a chance he might actually exercise it if he gets really annoyed with people. So, First Sea Lord, First Lord of the Sea would be the same person, but different periods when it's titled, and now it's sort of the First Sea Lord is what we normally call it these days. But in different periods, the titles were slightly different and changed around. It gets... The thing I always point out, and there's a debate going on between about HNDs versus uni degrees, and in my experience, the HNDs and HNCs are equivalent to the practical side of the first year of a degree and the practical side of a second year of degree. But they don't do the theoretical side, which is why when they transfer into universities, they sometimes find it a complete interesting mix-up, and they end up spending a lot of time with someone like me going, how do we do this? And I go, don't worry, this is what I live for, to explain the academicals to you. BCH, that is a good story. During the Gulf War, myself and E5 at the time, and 3 of my shipmates got drunk and stupid in Bahrain. We were actually rescued and personally driven back to the ship by Vice Admiral Wilson. We didn't even realize it was him that pulled us out of there and saved our behinds from what could have been a very bad situation. Respect. I'm going to apologize for eating. I know there are some people who watch these things and don't like me eating in them. I'm just going to say, because of the tooth operation, ended up lunch didn't really go down well for me, so hence the snacks. So, as we're doing academic discussions going on, I'm going to throw in a bit of a random thing for leadership. And this is because I've got 2 new books to come through. And I'm going to be getting them next. But as we're talking academic, I thought I'd throw in this one. And this is usually the sort of point at which I've got students, especially when I'm teaching professional military types. There are 2 groups. They'll divide into 2 groups. The students will divide into 2 groups. There'll be the ones who look at me and go, that's interesting. And there'll be the ones who look at me and go, you're nuts. That cannot teach me anything about leadership. And actually it can. Because in Terry Pratchett, there is Sam Vines, fairly decent leader. But The reason I picked this book is because it has someone else who is, I would argue, one of the best leaders ever written up in the entirety of fiction going. And if Glenn Stewart is watching us later, feel free to disagree with me, but well, this is the example I would give. This is the person I would pick as a leader who really should be listened to and thought about as an example of leadership. I'm going to read you the example, and I'm going to ask you whether you can work out who it is I'm talking about. It might have been possible to cut the air in an uncommon with a knife. Had anyone been able to find a knife, or hold a knife the right way if found? From the point of view of the wizards, it was business as usual, but while a number of captains were being wheeled away in a wheelbarrow, thoughtfully stationed there early in the evening, there were enough visitors still standing to make for a damp, hot hubbub. In an unregarded corner, the patrician and two arch-chancellors had found a space where they could relax unheeded in the big chairs and settle a few matters. "You know, Henry," said Venerani to the former dean, "I think it would be a very good idea if you were to referee the match." "Oh, come on! I think that'd be most unfair," said Ridley. "To whom, pray?" "Well, said Ridley, "it could be a question of rivalry between wizards." "But on the other hand," said Venerani, his voice all smoothness, "it might also be said that for political reasons another wizard would have a vested interest in not allowing a fellow archmage to be seen to be bested by people who, despite their often amazing talents, skills, features, and histories, are nevertheless lumped together in the term ordinary people." Ridley raised a very big brandy glass in the general direction of the edge of the universe. "I have every faith in my friend Henry," he said, "even though he's a little bit on the tubby side." "Oh, unfair!" snapped Henry. "A large man might be quite light on his feet. Is there any chance of me having the poisoned dagger?" "In these modern times," said Venerani, "I'm sorry to say that a whistle of some sort will have to suffice." At which point someone tried to slap Venerani on the back. It happened with remarkable speed and ended possibly even faster than it began. Venerani, still seated in his chair, with his beer mag in one hand and the man's wrist gripped tightly at head height. He let go and said, "Can I help you, sir?" "You're that Lord Venerani, aren't ya? I've seen you on them postage stamps." Ridley glanced up. Some of Lord Venerani's clerks were briskly heading towards them, along with some of the slurred speaker's friends, who could be defined at this point as people who were slightly more sober than he was, and right now were sobering up very, very fast, because when you have just slapped a tyrant on the back, you need all the friends you can get. Venerani nodded at the gentleman, who evaporated back into the crowd, and when he snapped his fingers at one of the waiters, "A chair here, please, for my new friend." "Are you sure?" said Ridley, as a chair was pushed under the man, who, by happy coincidence, was falling backwards in any case. "I mean," said the man, "everyone says you're a bit of a wanker, but I says you're all right over this football thing. See your future in there slogging away. I should know I got kicked in the head quite a few times." "Really?" said Lord Venerani. "And what is your name?" "Swimming, sir," said the man. "Any other name by any chance?" said Venerani. "Dustworthy," he said. He raised the finger in the kind of salute. "Captain, the Cockbill Boers." "Ah, you aren't having a good season," said Venerani. "You need fresh blood in the squad, especially since Jimmy Wilkins got put into the tanty after eating someone's nose. Nathill walked all over you because you lost your backbone when both of the Pinchpenny brothers were taken to the Lady Sybil. And you've been struck down in the mud for 3 seasons. Okay, everyone says that Harry Capstick is making a very good showing since you brought him for Treacle Mine Tuesday for 2 crates of Winkle's Old Peculiar and a sack of pork scratchings, which is not bad for a man with a wooden leg, but there's never anyone in support." A circle of silence spread outwards. From Venerani and the swaying Swivens, Ridley's mouth had dropped open, and Henry's brandy glass remained half empty, an unusual occurrence for a glass that's been in the hands of a wizard for more than 15 seconds. "Also, I'm hearing that your pies are leaving a lot to be desired, such as dead, cooked, organic content," continued Venerani. "Can't get the shove behind you when the pies are seen to walk about." "My lads," said Tridden, "our best there is. It's not their fault they're up against better people. They never gets a chance to play someone they can beat. They always gives it 120%, and you can't give more than that. Anyhow, how come you know all this stuff? It's not like we're big in the league. Oh, I take an interest, said Veterani. I believe that football is a lot like life. There is that, sir. There is that. You do your best, and then someone kicks you in the fork. Then I strongly advise you to take an interest in our new football, said Veterani, which will be about speed, skill, and thinking. Oh, yeah, right. I can do all them, said Shriven, at which point he fell off his chair. Does this poor man have any friends here? Said Veterani, turning to the crowd. There was some difference amongst the concerning whether or not it was a good idea to be friends with Shriven at this point. Veterani raised his voice. I would just like a couple of people to take him back to his home. I would like them to put him to bed and see that no trouble comes to him. Perhaps they ought to stay with him until morning, too, because he just might try to commit suicide when he wakes up. There's leadership going on there, isn't there? There's a lot of leadership going on there. Graham Hanna, have you also found, Doc, that many high HNs are used to small block and they don't do finals or any years? They do need some support with those. It's an adjustment. It's a different style. I always try and explain to people it's not so much one's better than the other. It's a different style, and some styles suit one style, and some styles suit the other. It's it's the good thing. You want the different options because people are different. A one-size-fits-all system fits no one. It really doesn't. Having a system of a range of 80% options, for which someone can find an 80% solution, is a system which will provide a lot more quality. John South, I remember on my first ship, the XO was a senior rate, didn't have a good service medal, despite being Navy 20 years ago. Turned out, as a young man, he accidentally set fire to a naffy. DH89, favourite naval war film? Alexander. Ooh. It's got to be between The Cruel Sea and The River Plate. Battle of River Plate. I have both those in HD on my Amazon Prime. I watch them wherever I go. They're things I always have stocked there just if I want to see them. Ridickley. Ridickley was quite a good leader, but no, it's not the Ridickley who I'm picking out in that excerpt. Librarian's also got some leadership skills on him. Hello, PME. How you doing? Hi, Strider. That's right, even the Brits overdo the Brit accent. It's not the Brit accent, it's the British drunk accent. That was Unseen Academicals. Grandma, I agree on one size isn't all. You must be one of the few that takes time to help them adjust. Many did. Many did and do not. Yeah, well, as I keep being told by various universities when I apply for posts and etc., I don't produce enough. I don't produce my research fast enough in terms of books and journal articles. I'm far too much of a teacher than a researcher, and that's what they want. Yeah. Very lastly, Venerani was who you were thinking of, although I'm not sure the leadership is the right description of what he does. But ridiculously is underrated and unsurrounded, especially by the other wizards. True, but the thing is, I always think if you actually become Archmage of the unseen, that particular university, then you are pretty darn good. And I've just dropped my. Whew. Came back okay. Where's the other one? Ah. Why is it they always drop icing up? Just have to check the floor now. That's terrible. Sorry about this. Just checking the floors to check I don't roll my chair through chocolate. No. It isn't on the floor, and they're all fine. Terrible. And yes, we do need to figure, Melanie, out what these high-pitched points are that come in sometimes. Good evening, Doctor. My daughter is making improvised 4.5-inch shells out of Coke bottles. Looks at me and says, "Is the English guy you listen to every Sunday your hero?" Well, if I am Rapid, then there's a problem, because I don't really consider myself a hero in any way, shape, or form. But the fact she's making it from Coke bottles is very good. Although, really, to be honest, to be doing a true 4.5-inch, she should be making them from baked bean cans, because those actually have been fired in combat. Think of that whenever you're eating baked beans, a can of baked beans. Remember, cans of baked beans have actually been used as projectiles in combat. They were fired at an Italian battleship. Mrs. Rayback needs an explanation of kangaroo assassins. Jamie has kangaroo and koala assassins. Jamie, of course, is armored carriers. We're not quite sure how he's acquired them, but he does have them, and we worry regularly that if we upset him too much, he will dispatch one to come and take us down. Because it's well known, the order of scary, dangerous Australian wildlife goes koalas, kangaroos, emus. Now, koalas and kangaroos have proved, if you offer them right incentive, they will become your assassins for hire and can be very loyal soldiers. Emus, well, they are basically their own nation inside Australia, have won wars for their independence, and as we know and understand this very well, the Australians give the basically let the emus do what they want because there is no stopping them. P2000s are great fun, but be wary. You can roll them quite well. Hi, George Newman. Come guys, unseen academicals, yeah. In pen, paper, dice RPGs, we sometimes wonder how authorities perceive and deal with high-powered magic users. In unseen, in most in Terry Pratchett, they usually get drunk with them. VCH, amongst our and Captain Samuels, whom would you ascribe as being the one who demonstrated incredible leadership skills despite being totally unexpected from that particular person? You see, once you get to captain, it's a bit expected of you. So, in the nicest way, once you get to captain, you're expected to demonstrate. It's more a case of if you don't demonstrate leadership skills, that sticks out. But in terms of demonstrating them beyond their own standing in terms of where they were coming from and expectation. Casper John is very good. Admiral Duncan was certainly unexpected. He was considered a good admiral, but what he did at Camperdown was considered very, very good. So yeah, there's a couple who, but once you get to captain, you're sort of expected to do it. Graham Handler. Doc will have seen many drunk, very posh accents at the time. He's attended mess dinners, and anyone that hasn't, you don't have a clue what I mean. Oh yeah. You want to know a scary thing though? It's when if you're at a no ranks mess dinner, which is I'm putting into that phraseology because there's other depending on ships etc. They have different traditions and some different units have so basically no ranks or an all ranks dinner, mess dinner, where basically the idea is that rank is suspended for the evening in that everyone in there is equal. You're a non-drinker, so you're not getting drunk. And basically, after everyone else has sort of quietly toddled off, there's you, and usually a very senior NCO and a very senior officer. Often a couple of the most senior officers and the most senior NCOs left, sitting there chatting. There's you with your Coke as a non-drinker chatting away, and you're fairly sure these particular persons have kept up all night long with matching everyone drink for drink, but they are still pretty much sober. And it's about 20 minutes into that sort of scenario when you're asked that you realize the reason they're stone cold sober is because they are now so used to the sheer quantity of alcohol consumption that's been going on that for them to get drunk would take an absolute crude carrier's worth of absinthe. Basically, anything less is not going to work. Or shifting them onto wine. Because the tannins work on everyone. Especially if you're used to spirits. Where are the fluffy research assistants? They haven't been out yet tonight. They've been out all day, so they've been out spending the whole day with me in the garden. Does dog hair improve the taste of chocolate? I've actually cleaned in here, so it's okay. There was no dog hair, and before anyone fixed that, it didn't land on the floor, the chocolate one. It landed on a piece of paper, which was on the floor. And luckily it didn't have any footmarks or anything on it, so, it's okay. Tanverk, what caliber were beans? They were fired from the 4.7-inch guns. Vintage guy, emus won a war. Yes, the emus won the war. The Australian Army brought machine guns. The emus still won. Oh. Nine-hand fractions. When you say back beans have been used against Italian battleships, is that because we got so close they could just lob them? We didn't actually put a can in the gun, right? No, we put a can in the gun, we'd run out of shells. We wanted to make that. Basically, the idea was as long as they were still getting hit with something and we were still firing something, they would think we were still attacking them. See, Richards, how long did it take to research and write your book? Oh, probably about 4 or 5 years, putting it all together. But that was after my PhD, and that was whilst working as well. This is the other thing with being in a non-research post and being dyslexic. It takes me longer, and I have to spend basically I have to do the research and writing in my spare time. I don't get paid by university to go off and do research, which I don't mind. You know, if you're lucky in a research post, you deserve it. But that does affect your pace of production, and you know some of us do need to sleep occasionally and eat occasionally, and I don't know, occasionally take a holiday, have a family. I'm the only boy in 40 cousins. I've got so many. Let's put it this way. I swear my productivity increased during COVID, mainly because I wasn't going to weddings every 5 minutes. Either as someone's date, because their boyfriend / whatever had dumped them, so they needed a +1 for a wedding, so cousins, or best man, or occasionally giving the bride away. This time I'm, of course, going to one quite soon as man of honor. So that's all starting up again. It happens. Cameron, on the disc, they deal with wizards in the same way as every other group. Let them build up a bureaucracy that then paralyzes any action by sheer inertia. It works! Plus alcohol. You student, I posted nothing. What are your thoughts on the esprit de corps in sci-fi? Seems like it's given very little thought every time, even though time distance would make it nearly impossible, even with FTL. You have to work on the ships. Basically, again, if we go back to the book I started this off with, this one. Your esprit de corps is entirely going to come from this one, which is entire separate heading. There's loyalty, and there's loyalty to your ship. Loyalty to your ship. How well you did things in your last ship is of no consequence. You must avoid saying how you did things in your last ship. The saying different ships, different long splices means, amongst other things, that there is more than one way of making a good long slice. And that's the important thing. Loyalty to your ship. Well, the ship you're on is what you're loyal to. John South, after one Trafalgar night, one of the Baguettes invited me and a few friends back to his bar and gave us a tab for the night. We ran up a £3,500 tab in one evening. It must only been about you and one other then. Judging by my experience. It's even more fun when you watch the person who's doing this, serving, running the bar in the wardroom goes, and then the senior officer just goes, go put yourself to bed. Don't worry, lad. We'll keep a tab. Fine. Go. You've got duty in the morning. I just go, how long are we going to be here? Okay. Get comfortable. You don't need to go to sleep, Alex, do you? No, I don't. Next morning, there's me and the assorted senior officers, all perfectly fine and awake and running around on basically no sleep, and everyone's wondering how we're up. Me drinking milk, them drinking usually tea or coffee, and there's all these other people wandering around who haven't yet built up the same tolerance as the seniors, going, and it's even more fun when you get the odd other civilians there who are sort of looking at me and going, how are you keeping up? And I'm going, because I don't try and drink with them. I don't drink, they don't mind it, and we're all okay. Ian Stradling, either that or they use the engineering trick of starting off with the alcohol and switching to Coke when you think everyone else is too drunk to notice. Oh, I have. I've never had one of them do that, but I have had one who, because he ended up, then I still not blue losers. Thankfully, we've seen enough that it wasn't going to cause trouble, but he ended up having to give one of his kidneys away, and so he was no longer drinking, and he liked me at dinners, especially because I was his coke companion, as he called me. And when he first said that out loud, my coke companion's here, the amount of people who looked around and went, "Is you doing drugs?" No, I brought the Coca-Cola. Or I think in our first one, I actually produced from my bag, which I had carefully stowed, a bottle of 1901 Iron Brew, and he just went, "Hello." I think I was favourite and blessed after that point. Sharon Gordon, hello, a bit later conversation. What's your opinion on the new agreement between China and Solomons? Will it affect Australian response to a Taiwan situation? It. Well, I don't think it's good. I think it's a lot of the opening salvo in a long game, and I think the trouble is people like Australia, etc., haven't realised the game was being played, and I know they're going to need to step on and work it out. It will affect response, but how will it affect response? And if I was the Solomon Islands, I'd be worried that in any conflict, they could be the ones that end up occupied. In nicest way. This is the trouble, because we can all remember what were all those allies. What happened to all those allies of Germany, etc., in World War One? Yeah, they were a land power which had built up a strong navy. But once their navy was bottled up, all their allies was gobbled up as well. It's not good history. Man of honor. When you don't want your girlfriends upset because you didn't pick them, girlfriends or sisters. Hi Sam, if you're watching. Guy, any luck with the Vickers triple turret picture research? I've done all I can do without visiting Newcastle and Glasgow. So that's on my list of things to do. Once I've now decided that's going to be after I go to Canada. I'm going to come back and then I'm probably going to pop up there in... Well, I think how it's going to structure is I'm going to get about a week... a few weeks doing revision courses over the summer, and they're going to be quite far up the country anyway. So it's going to be structured that I'm going to be doing the opening week and possibly the closing week. And the week in between, instead of coming home, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drive the rest of the way out of the country and do Newcastle, Glasgow, and then drive my way back. So I'll have sort of 9... I'll be able to leave on the Friday night and get back on the Sunday. And basically, that's what I'll do. I'll have 9 days to go up, do the research, and come back. VCH, someday perhaps I'll be paid for the research I do, but that's not important. A good researcher does it out of love. Yes, the closest I have to being paid for the research I do is YouTube. And thank you very much. It's basically all the support I get through YouTube, the super chats, the Patreon especially, the people watching the adverts. All that is basically what funds my research. And I suppose the book now, although... And of course, the people who fundraise for me to go to Canada. And I've got a grant as well. So I've had some grants in my time. I have to say, I tend to have more luck with the grants, which are from... the organisations which other people ignore. I tend to go and do the research into my grant providers. Colin Cameron, I've heard a story that there was a competition between RAR and frigates post-war to find far the most unusual thing they could find from the end of mortars. Is that true? Yes, they did all sorts of things. Mod how? Real and Academicals. I'd love to share a pint of Old Winkles ridiculously in the library, and I think we all would. Garen Companion. Yep. No, sorry, 2 litres of Coke is an excellent colour. Really? Sean quickly. Martin Howell, just remember when you're halfway through that bottle, not to let the M1s know how. Sorry, Mike. The Solomons take a long time to build up. They will, though. Death Squad. How likely is it the Solomons ended up in a debt trap, allowing a Chinese base was the cost? Never be unsure about that. Right. So, let's see. What's the timing? And when I mean timing, I mean, is it time for the next one? It is. So, in that, we'll do the next book. 0130. And the next book we're going to do Hotspur. Now, this book is cool. It's also brand new. It's not even out yet. And I got sent a version to look through, and I was very, very excited. Thank you, Bijan. And this is a really, really cool book. But, and I say this, it's kind of strange, because usually whenever I pick a section from a book, I try and pick a section from the middle of the book, mainly because anyone can pick up and read up the beginning and all the end and all that. That's kind of what some of the online reviewers tend to do. And I'm not sure that really gives you a good review of the book. However, saying all this, if we're going to talk about leadership, there is something which every author has to do when you talk about leadership. You have to lay out your standards by which you are going to judge the leader. Now, this is the good point. This is what John Sadler does this in the introduction almost. He lays out exactly how you judge a leader and how you should judge a leader. And it's about context and nuance, because a leader is not going to be the same in every scenario. A leader who works well in one scenario might be an absolutely terrible leader in another scenario. That's true. Here's the thing. There are people who are very good captains who are terrible admirals. There are people who are terrible captains. They are don't take any. They don't seem to understand what's going on. They never seem to have a grasp of what their departments are doing, etc. But who will make absolutely excellent admirals because they think at that level. And your job is to try and work out whether that's because they think at that level or whether because they're just terrible captains. And try and match them up with the appropriate executive officer, because that's usually a good scenario to train up an executive officer who's going to be a very good captain, but not necessarily a very good admiral. Actually, it might make someone who's going an executive officer who's on track to become a very good captain because of conversations with that captain will be a good admiral, actually become a better admiral when they become an admiral, because they'll be have someone taught and teach them to think at that level. So, here is a section entitled The Frep. Henry Percy, to be called Hotspur, and whose name, fame, and achievement were to be forever linked to the Anglo-Scottish borderland, was a Northumbrian icon, even to the extent he's been anecdotally linked to the distinctive dialect, although in fact it predates him by centuries. Any understanding we may have of the man depends on grasping the wider context of his background, both personal and geographical. This Anglo-Scottish border was an incredibly wild frontier. No young Lochinvars of Scots romantic tradition, but a bitter, vindictive, and unrelenting struggle at state and sub-state levels. Magnates, gentries, and commoners were all involved. Edward I of England, Longshanks, had begun the 300 Years' War in 1296, so it had been simmered for 60 and more years before Hotspur was born. It was nasty from the start. Edward had ravaged Berwick-upon-Tweed, then a major Scottish port, with frenetic violence, murdering, it was said, 7,000 of its citizens, men, women, and children. That pretty much set the tone. It wasn't, as Alistair MacDonald points out, a sustained continuum. There were wars burnt, flickered, and flamed with varying intensity. It went from bad to unbelievably bad, awful, and catastrophic. Hi, Jack Ray. Oh, you've been a member for 8 months. Thank you. In 1369, it flared up again after a period of, by local standards, relative calm since the defeat and capture of David II at Neville's Cross in October 1346. And Neville's Cross is a really interesting battle. If you want to look up an interesting battle in the medieval period, Neville's Cross. It's one that's not talked about a lot. It's no Agincourt, Crecy, or anything like that. But Neville's Cross will teach you a lot about medieval tactics and doctrine. Or rather, where they had some. This local Ragnarok was linked to Edward III and his son the Black Prince's Wars in France. The 300 Years' War as a facet of the 100 Years' War. The Prince's stunning triumph against odds at Poitiers, adding the King of France to his father's cachet of high-value prisoners, set the seal on a successful epoch. After 1369, as the French wars kicked off again, there was a resurgence in Scots military activity. Like Bertrand de Guzman, the King of France's hog in armour, George Dunbar, the Scottish Earl of March, led the charge from the north of the border, but with much more caution than elan. He'd seen where that led. He knew just what he was doing and did it very well. So Hotspur was born in his era of heightened tensions and increasing march of violence. He didn't create a broken frontier, but he helped keep it that way. He also arrived in a new era of localized tactical innovation, the day of the Hobler, border light cavalry. Edward I's abortive Weardale campaigns of 1327 had clearly shown that a traditional deployment of barded knights, heavily armoured, superbly mounted but dependent on an extensive logistical tail, didn't work well on the borders. Local marchers, mounted on sturdy garrons, self-reliant, hard-riding and hard-hitting, were now the real arbiters of this harsh and unforgiving school. Young Percy's boot camp, it didn't offer second chances. Name was all important. Those later to be dubbed the riding names, the infamous Reivers, lived by a ruthless and expedient code which relied wholly on blood and affinity. There were no other loyalties. Nationhood was an academic concept, reality adjusted at will. In time, the riding names from those hard uplands would coalesce into cross-border criminal gangs chaired by local leaders, or heidmen. Certainly hard men. To get them to follow you, you'd have to earn their respect, and it took a very particular type of man or woman to achieve that. Naturally, if you offered loot, it helped. Hotspur proved to be such a man. If he was rough, callous, vain, and swaggering, then he was just fitting in with what the role required. There was his own name as well. A century before, and the Percys would barely be known in Northumberland. By young Harry's time, they were preeminent, a meteoric rise which would burn most brightly during his lifetime before crashing. The Percys went from being local players to regional and then national. At each bound, their wealth and prestige soared by another prodigious leap, so their fall, when it came, was also prodigious. It was the border wars, the ruin of so many, that gave them their chance to excel as knights, to swell and prosper as landowners. By the time Harry Percy came into the world, his father pretty much had control of the border, aside from the Nevilles, of course. This is a book worth reading if you are interested in medieval history, if you're interested in leadership, and if you're interested in understanding some of the context of the time. It's not a nice book to read, in that it is going to confront you with the proper history. So it's not something you read if you want something which is just going to give you, oh, and then there was a battle, and da-da-da-da-da. But if you want accurate history, and if you don't mind reading the truth of what happened, and some of the really nasty stuff that happened, as well as some of the better stuff, but some really nasty stuff, this is definitely the book you want to get. This is good history. Mm-hmm. Karen, the US Battleship Museum talked about blanking over portside steam ports to provide steam when in port. What's this feature on other ships? In some of the US ships it was because of the systems they employed. And I think so in some of the US cruisers as well. Don't think so in destroyers, and I don't think in anyone other than... I think some of the... I want to say Italian, but I'm not 100% sure. Had a similar system. So I'm going to be honest in saying I know some of the American battleships had the system, some American cruisers, if it's the system I think you're describing. But I want to say Italian as well, but I don't know why. There's something ringing in the back of my head, but I cannot be 100% sure. Seriously, when you do your research on triple is it going to just be plowing through loads of papers? Pretty much. Me diving into an archive and basically coming out with going, Vision. According to the press, most Solomon Island politics and public is anti-China. The PM who's pro-China. Well, it's very easy to be anti-China when that's going to get you mentioned in our press, and basically one party's going to get China's support, one party's going to get America's support, and they're oscillate between the two to try and play them off against it for their own national gain, probably. Do you think Gary Neville's jewelry was a medieval battle? No. Okay. Cute. Sean Clarke, have you had a chance to read Farfarers by Fairleigh Mogart? No. I think I've heard of it, and I think I might have a copy somewhere on its way to me. Graham Hartley, you mean that is a book that's actually giving facts on narrative? Yes. It was to allow steam to be supplied from dockside to bring systems on or maintain them without having boilers on board. Yeah, and I'm thinking the Italians had something on their stern to do something similar. That was uncommon. Yeah, because let's put it this way: the British battleships, etc., most of the British battleships tended to have, once the electricity came in, they had smaller generators they would run. Or they'd be run based off their having their boiler, lighting their own boilers. There are various views on how you run it, but also you have to remember there's the infrastructure. If you are a British or a British ship that's going around the world, where are you going to be stopping? Will they have the infrastructure to support those sorts of things? Whereas American and the French, I don't think had it because the French just don't have any sort of support. The Americans, their ships aren't spending enough time going out of America, and usually are back in the same home port, so they can afford to have that system. The British, well, you're not really going to get that kind of support in Scapa Flow, so you don't do it. Sean Gregory, why is it every time Dr. C says diving into an archive, I envision Scrooge McDuck diving in his gold type scenario playing out? You've obviously seen me in Drac in an archive at some point. Okay, thanks, heard that, and it made sense when I heard it, but it made me think that, that small part of a ship that is easily overlooked. There are lots of small parts of ships which are easily overlooked. Some cool stuff, though. Why aren't there more cruiser museums? I know they aren't as awesome as battleships or carriers. There's numerous destroyers, but why so few of them? Because it wasn't realised until too late that the cruisers were going away just as much as the battleships were. You have to remember, when HMS Belfast has made a museum ship, the Royal Navy still has cruisers in service, and they're building through-deck cruisers. The point is, the cruisers didn't have that massive disappearance. Everyone thought was looking around going, still cruisers, still cruisers, still cruisers. Went, oh, where have they gone? Hmm. Have you any techniques on how you do research? I try and scout out the archives beforehand. I try and make friends with the archivists because they'll know their archives far better than I ever will because they live with it, and get their advice. And then I work for it. And I work for it as diligently as I can do. I take photos of the documents while I'm there. I don't try and process them there. I do that later when I have time. I try and get through as many documents as I can because the thing you don't want to have to do is get back to your end of the country and find there's a document you've not got through and that you really need that document. So you want to go through as many documents as you can, but reading them takes time, so just take photos. I scan them and make notes as I go, but I don't read them in depth. I know, Calvin. I'll be back to you. I'll get back to you. Don't worry. I know, Calvin. But I'll get back to you. Sorry. Cake went down the wrong tube. I might do a video on archival research because I've been talking to some of my students about doing one because they need some help because some of them are actually going to do archival research. And the thing is, engineering students don't tend to be taught archival research, and now they're actually going to do it. Well, it's causing consternation. But there's a very good reason they're going to do it. Basically, they have to. You've had years and years of not having enough time in labs and COVID restrictions, and still got COVID restrictions going on for labs and lab work. And, well, life's happened. And unfortunately with life, it's kept going, so now they're trying to do research, what I would call the historian route. By going to archives. And generally finding people are very helpful in archives, but they need to know their techniques. So I might well do a video about it. About doing archive research. Or at least some tips. It's fun. Sorry, one of the cake wrappers has disappeared, I think. I'm not sure where I put it down. No, that is only one. So I've got 3 cake wrappers. I've eaten 4 cakes. I'll find it in a bit. Or amber, I think. That'll help things. Let's see. Dr. Clarke, 2 Fleet Air Arm aircraft questions. 1. Can you compare contrast the albacore and swordfish? How did the Wildcat Martlet stack up against European fighters? The Wildcat Martlet stacked up pretty well against European fighters. They did a fairly good job in the Mediterranean and were certainly far better than the RN had access to in other single-seat fighters at the time, especially for naval duties, which is why they were employed as they were, especially on the Bay of Biscay convoys, because they could provide the support there where they needed them. Albacore and swordfish, basically, they take a punt on the wrong engine. And that's the problem for the albacore. The albacore was supposed to be the fill-in, so they didn't really worry about the engine. And they went for an engine which was theoretically better, but turned out to not be as reliable as the Pegasus of the swordfish. Which is why you end up with that song, "Oh, bring back my Peggy to me." Because literally, the problem for the swordfish was the reliability of the engine. So otherwise, they're broadly speaking similar, but one has a canopy. Colin Cameron, I thought Bruships were like camper vans. They had the ability to hook up to external electrical power if available, but generated if not available. Pretty much. And more if not, generated it. Graham Hamlet, have you read any of Professor Christopher Duffy? Okay, not from naval, military, not naval, but from military perspective, especially military experience in the Age of Reason. I have. I only found out for Adobe Scan after I did my archive research. There are so many good apps you can get, but you need a good phone if you're going to use them. I do my research on my phones, and I tend to use a Samsung camera rather than an iPhone. And the reason for that is, whilst the iPhone does have some very good apps, the Samsung camera tends to actually pick up, and this is going to sound terrible, the pink paper which naval files use, pink and yellow paper better than the iPhone. I've done exhaustive checks with friends who have iPhones. We've compared them, and for some on the white paper, they're broadly speaking the same. iPhone might be slightly better, but on the pink and the yellow paper, the Samsung phones tend to be better. The Android ones. We have no idea why. Fine Art Emily, as an engineer who's done some archive research, it's fun. It is. Do you often have to deal with records on microfiche? Sometimes. Sometimes. It's not my favorite. But sometimes. I prefer it when they're files. Remember, did Clarke, beyond turning the enemy lookouts to stone upon visual contact, did the Blackman actually do or provide anything useful? It was actually a very good reconnaissance asset and was probably one of the best spotting fire control assets the Royal Navy in that era had. It would have been a massive advantage in any fleet battle in terms of getting the fire on target, as long as fighters could keep them up there. Stephen Richards, get the FRA and he will find a cake. Actually, to be honest, the Tafra is probably better. The FRA is a little bit selective over what he eats. The Tafra has no qualms, limitations, or desires to not eat anything. In fact, in his view, all food belongs to him and is his. Inside of the Scroll Book. No, it's not inside of the Scroll Book. I will check through the books just to check. No. Right. If a 1982 Malta Air Wing is 19 Phantom, 21 Buccaneer, and 3 Hawkeye, 1 Greyhound, 6 Sea Kings, 2 Wessex. Based on Ark and Eagle, it sort of sounds right. And let's say you have 2 to 3 of them, plus Hermes and Invincible. How do you think this changes the war? Is Standing Runway taken out first to try for everything, not just the fast jets? Would the ARA-CV be found and taken out with our Bucks? Can Hawkeye prevent Sheffield and Coventry? Would Bucks be deployed against mainland airbase, Argentinian ones that is? Here's the first question, NHP, Nigerian Productions. Do you think the war would actually happen? If the RN has 2 to 3 Maltas, plus Hermes and Invincible in service, that's a massive air group and capability. That's probably at least 2 Maltas are deployed, plus Hermes as well, let's be honest, because those will be your worked up ships. So you'll probably have those 3 available most quickly. In which case, Hermes is probably coming down its commando carrier role and is attached with the Royal Marines, providing increased basically as an LPH. And so that means you probably have 38 Phantoms and 42 Buccaneers and 6 Hawkeyes and 2 Greyhounds and 12 Sea Kings and 4 Wessexes on those 2 carriers and 2 Maltas coming down alone. That's not something which the Argentinian Air Force is built for or is even capable of dealing with at the Falklands. If they've attacked the Falklands at that point, then they are cruising for Armageddon. And in the nicest way, 42 Buccaneers being called in to strike, probably with phantom coverage, against the ARA Vicente de Mayo. He's not going to do that well, but yeah. Let's put it this way. You probably don't have the Royal Navy waiting around for Stanley Airport to be attacked by a Vulcan bomber. It will have been shredded by end of day one of the carriers actually getting within strike range. And that'll be the first thing the British will do. The British will the carriers, at least one of them, will surge down. Probably both of them will surge down as fast as they can with escorts to arrive early and unseen. And the Phantoms will be shooting things like the 707, etc., out of the air. There'll be accidents where the Argentinian 707, which is supposed to be spotting them, will be spotted and approached into cannon range, verified, and then have its wings shredded off. So here, how many F-35s would it need to sink the Bismarck? Depends what weapon outfit you're carrying them. If you're the British currently, you haven't got enough naval strike any naval strike missiles, etc. So probably a lot because you'd be using laser-guided bombs. But you could still do some fairly damage, but they're not really armor penetrating, but could probably work. But it would be basically one because it would have to be going out, attacking, coming back, and rearming, and then going out and dropping off again if they needed to. So Johnson, I don't think YF-23 is going to come back to as the F-22 replacement. I can understand the dream, but that ain't happening. Unless someone's got some serious money and is able to do some serious improvements, as much as good it was. See, no, can you comment on the usefulness of seaplane tenders versus proper aircraft carriers in World War II? Basically, your seaplane tender is how you turn any island or any usable space into a seaplane airport, an airfield, and be able to support them. An aircraft carrier's mobile air support with your fleet. Basically, you are setting up an seaplane base for the seaplanes to operate in areas. So one is about gaining command of the sea. One is about controlling the sea. Seaplane tenders are basically, okay, we're turning up in this little secluded spot. We're setting up a PBY base, dug out, fly around, and they come back. All good. Decision. I wish my PYR would be more selective on what she eats. Silly Flu thinks all the stuff that is a gourmet cuisine that gives her horrible indigestion. Mine, they both what they eat. Sometimes I do not. I swear, sometimes depending on what they eat, they turn into mobile chemical warfare factories. So here's the question: would Bismarck know she was under attack before it got hit? Nope. I doubt they'd even hear the F-35, and I suppose why does the F-35 have to get low enough for them to hear it? Why does it need to go why does it need to go sonic speed? Basically, the first load of bombs, even if they're carrying external load, the first bombs would soften up the. It'd be kind of like what you do think of it in terms of shell damage. Okay. It's an armor-piercing shell. Right then, it'll go straight through it. It might go through the armor. It might also bounce off. But the thing is, if you're firing a semi-armor-piercing high explosive, it possibly won't go through the armor, but it'll create a weakened area, and the next one will go through. And that's the point of what you do. Darren Burton, I'm allowing the possibility of government announcing massive cutbacks in 1901, including doing away with Malta in the next few years. Then Argentina would wait till after the Maltas are gone. That's what they did. They waited till Ark Royal and Eagle were both firmly gone, and I mean firmly gone, before they did anything. Sim Richards, if the models are around, do you keep the Darings for carry escort? The Darings might actually have stayed around for a bit longer. They'd certainly have had to have more counties. And probably the Type 82s would be actually built in numbers. So it'd be the Type 82s you'd probably be worrying about, not the Type 42s. Colin Cameron, if the UK maintained a Cadabar capability of new carrying in the late 70s, do you think some bright spark would attempt navalisation on Tornado? Yep! Do I think we'd end up getting an F-18? Yep! They're not exactly air warfare ships, but they could maybe work for it. I know, US Air Force don't have the money to restart the F-22 line, and Lockheed lost the detailed documentation they were paid to develop and keep on their production methods. Yeah, lost. Pretty much that's the problem with the Type 23, the YF-23. Alright, let's see. 0145. It's part 8. And then 02. Unboxing. A Sailor's Odyssey. So, I have a very cool book to show you, and it's something that's so cool, you're all going to be quite in shock. So, normally I get out this book quite a lot, and this is A Sailor's Odyssey, which of course is Cunningham's autobiography. And you've seen that, but it's an old book, and it's been around for a long time, and trying to get a copy is like trying to get hen's teeth. This has arrived. This arrived from my lovely friends at Pen and Sword. I like these people. They're very nice. They have sent me this, which is a Seaforth imprint. And I am told that it will be priced. Actually, I haven't given me the price there. Told the price is going to be £25. A Sailor's Odyssey, the autobiography of Admiral Andrew Cunningham. It is beautifully designed, beautifully put together. It's absolutely wonderful craftsmanship and quality. And yes, the page numbers differ slightly. There is an introduction from Admiral Sir Jock Slater in here. Had it in. But it's really, really cool. So there you go. There's a new version of A Sailor's Odyssey. And because I've read so much often from Sailor's Odyssey, I'm going to read from Sir Jock Slater's introduction. And Sir Jock is not a man or an admiral you take lightly. He is a very, very good admiral. I'm delighted that Seaforth Publishing has chosen to reprint A Sailor's Odyssey, which my great-uncle, Andrew Cunningham, wrote with the stalwart help of his old destroyer friend, Captain Taffril Dorling, and published in 1951. Since then, a number of biographies have been written, and indeed the Navy Records Society has published 2 volumes of the Cunningham Papers. Volume 1, The Mediterranean Fleet, 1939-42 in 1999, and Volume 2, The Triumph of Allied Sea Power, 1942-46 in 2006. His detailed and fascinating autobiography has undoubtedly stood the test of time, and as many of the generation involved in Cunningham's life are no longer with us, a reprint is most welcome. 3 of Cunningham's great-nephews, Sir John Cunningham, Dr. Sandy McKendrick, and I have decided that any proceeds from this new edition should be shared between the Royal Navy and Royal Marines Charity and King Edward VII Hospital, the latter paying tribute to Cunningham's distinguished father, Professor D.J. Cunningham, of Cunningham's Textbook of Anatomy fame. I look back on the many weekends I spent with the Cunninghams at the Palace House in Bishop's Waltham as a young naval officer in the late 50s and early 60s, and the privilege I enjoyed of hearing first-hand my uncle's forthright views on so many topics, not least the Royal Navy. I just wish that I'd been able to record them. Shrewd and perceptive, little escaped his sharp comments delivered with a penetrating gaze, but often with a twinkle in his eye. Moreover, he had the most engaging habit of enjoying mischievous, boyish pranks to keep us all on our toes. He was great fun to be with, very good company, and surprisingly modest. I often reflect on what made him the best of destroyer captains. Without a doubt, it was the first-class seamanship, fine ship handling, tough, uncompromising discipline, and aggressive fighting spirit. He was clearly greatly respected in command, but I expect feared by those who do not meet his high standards and expectations. Later as a commander-in-chief, he showed uncanny foresight, incredible stamina, supreme courage, leadership of the highest order, and he was resolute in adversity. Behind this was shining honesty, deep humanity, and wise counsel. In writing his memoirs 70 years ago, he was, of course, not able to comment on how much his operational decisions were affected by the sterling work of the intelligence agencies, not least Bletchley Park. That material was then classified. The hugely significant victory at Matapan in 1941, for example, was the first major Royal Navy operation in the Second World War to be based on Signet, and in this case the source was the Italian naval enigma. But the absence of this material does not in the least detract from either the accuracy or the vividness of the narrative. One of the many signed photographs in Cunningham's study in the Palace House was the one from Winston Churchill inscribed to the great Admiral of the Mediterranean. Although he much admired Cunningham's offensive spirit and willingness to take risks, he said that the Prime Minister was not initially keen to appoint him as First Sea Lord when Sir Dudley Pound died, as he was uneasy that, unlike others, Cunningham might prove less malleable. However, the Royal Navy was in no doubt that Cunningham was the right man to lead the service at such a critical time. In the event, he proved highly influential, but was not fully at ease in the corridors of power, and found the administration burdensome and irritating, which must have been trying for the naval staff. Furthermore, Cunningham clearly found the Prime Minister a real challenge to satisfy. That said, there was obviously a deep respect on both sides, and Churchill must have known that Cunningham was a hard taskmaster and leading in the senior service with great ability. Moreover, there was an admirable rapport amongst the Chief of Staff. Cunningham was buried at sea off the Nab Tower on the 18th June 1963. He lay in state in the chapel of HMS Nelson, the naval barracks, and was then taken through the streets of Portsmouth on a gun carriage drawn by sailors, preceded by a double Royal Marines band. Crowds had assembled to pay their respects. With members of my family, I processed behind the coffin down the South Railway jetty in the dockyard, where HMS Hampshire, the county-class destroyer, was preparing to sail. Admiral of the Fleet, Sir Caspar John, the First Sea Lord, led the pallbearers, including members of the Board Admiralty, and Lord Carrington, the First Lord of the Admiralty, led senior mourners in the procession. To this day, I can see the scene on the flight deck of Hampshire as the Chaplain of the Fleet and the senior Church of Scotland chaplain conducted the funeral service. The wind was strong and the sea rough with low, threatening clouds racing across the sky. As the coffin slipped into the sea, the ship fired a 19-gun salute. I knew we were all saying farewell to one of Britain's greatest fighting admirals, who had dedicated his life to the service of his country. For the Royal Navy, he loved and led with distinction. That, of course, was Admiral Jock Slater, First Sea Lord 1995 to 1998, and nephew of Cunningham. This is a really, really good book. As said, I will put a link below my account earlier to the Amazon for this, but it's going to be out soon. It's worthwhile getting. It's really, really good. And I'm very proud that I have both an original print copy and a new print copy. Because now I can use this for all my note-taking and everything instead of pushing this or breaking this poor thing in even more. Because it's been used so much over the years. Hello, Michael Patton. Juicy decision. Cunningham versus Nelson. Who would you want in charge of your fleet? I'd pick Cunningham over Nelson if I was in charge of talking First Sea Lord. If I was talking fighting fleet, probably Nelson. If I could, though, I would pick Henderson over both as the First Sea Lord and send the others to sea. Because Henderson, as good as he was as a First Sea Lord, as a Third Sea Lord, and as good as he was as a naval officer at sea, would probably have been the better one to manage the politicians at home, because he did such a good job as Third Sea Lord doing that. Unfortunately, he died, as did Admiral Black, and so Cunningham was the only choice available. And I will add, this is a really, really good book. There are really good pictures in here. There are some excellent maps. Evacuation from Greece. It's the sort of book where a historian can get lost in the index, just going, ooh, that person's mentioned and that person's mentioned there. What I liked is there's actually a mention in all the sort of books of Admiral Sir Reginald Henderson, and it's one of the few books which did this. During February, the Navy suffered a crushing blow when Admiral Sir Reginald G.H. Henderson, the Third Sea Lord and Controller, became seriously ill and had to leave his post at the Admiralty. This most versatile and talented officer had given outstanding service during the First World War, particularly at the Admiralty during our life and death struggle against the Kaiser's U-boats. In the years between the wars, he had held a variety of appointments. He had commanded aircraft carriers as a captain and had served as a rear admiral aircraft carriers. Better perhaps than anyone else, he realised the trials and perplexities of the Fleet Air Arm when working under the virtual control of the Air Ministry, and the fatal inefficiency of depriving the Navy of full command of what was rapidly becoming one of its principal weapons. No wiser choice could be made when Henderson was brought back to the Admiralty as controller in April 1934. Described by Lord Chatfield as that remarkable man and a brilliant officer full of imagination, resource, and initiative, he was one of the key men in our naval rearmament. Besides this, he had been largely instrumental in the replacement of our capital ships, crews, and destroyers. Relieved as controller by Rear Admiral Bruce Fraser, now Admiral Fleet Lord Fraser, on March the 1st, Sir Reginald Henderson's death on May the 22nd was a loss the Navy could ill afford, particularly at this time of crisis. Yeah. That's why it's passages like that added into books like this, which is what were the first things when I started doing my original reading, which gave me clues of going, hang on, there's an admiral going on here who's doing a lot of work who we know fedjul about. That reminds me, I've got to send the 1939. 19-gun salute. Yes, Admiral of the Fleet gets a 19-gun salute on their burial. Mm-hmm. Kieran, do you think the turboelectric US standards could be scaled up to 28 or 32 knot ships, or at that speed, just better to have geared turbines? Geared turbines probably more efficient at that speed. Right. I said hi to Michael Patton. Sean Quigley. Well, there's a new one on the book list. So I really need to win the lottery. The thing as my family reminds me is I actually have to play the lottery if I want to win the lottery, which is a problem. I do have an Amazon affiliate link, but so far I have never made any money from it, which is why I get very, very laissez-faire about actually using it. Right then, I will put a link to a Sailor's Odyssey down below. Right. So there should have appeared a link down below to a Sailor's Odyssey. It's a very, very good book, and it's worth it. They apparently only have one left in stock in Amazon UK, but you know, but they have others as well there. But yeah, it's worthwhile getting. It's a good book. It's really worth reading because he's a really good good admiral. Mm-hmm. The Hotspur book is out soon. It's not out yet, but it's a really good one. No, Enrix. Apparently Amazon UK has it, but not Amazon US. Dang, blasted. Naval, do you think there should or will be an HMS Cunningham? I'd love there to be an Admiral class, but I don't know if there's going to be. In my view, the Type 83 should be an Admiral class, either an Admiral class or, well, we've put it forward in different version in my Mine and Drax paper, which is going to come out eventually. When we finally get it polished up, every time we get more information comes about the Type 83, we go and rewrite it before it can, then has to go through the editing process again. One smart commander doesn't overcome incorrect doctrine, logistics, and political leadership. And maybe they could lead the coup and fight a figure that Europe will not tolerate Russia's colonial dream. I don't think you should hope for a coup. And look, how did Henderson die? Suddenly or prolonged illness? Sudden onset illness. Probably. There's various things. I know Dan Freeman theorizes some form of stroke. Others put forward some form of cancer. He definitely worked very, very hard. But as Jalen says, there's an epidemic of animals dying in their 50s and 60s, especially in their 50s, between the wars and shortway into World War II, from natural causes. Yeah. Why was the Admiralty showing favoritism towards Renown? She's nothing special, really, looking at her as it seems repulsing North modernization. They can't use the flagship the Hood was, because Renown had been used less. That's the thing. They are going to repair the ship, which is going to cost the least amount to repair and do up first. And that's what they do with Renown. Renown has been used less, so as I've said before when I did the Renown and Repulse video, Renown was used less, so Renown got refurbished first, because it would be cheaper. Woohoo, M-Ribs! That's good. You're going to enjoy it, M-Rigs. Right. So, how many books have I done? Technically, I've done 2 plus those. And I know I had 2 more. I think I have 2 more, but let me check my numbers because I know I've got 1 down there and I've got 1 elsewhere. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So I've done 5 books. I'm going to do some questions for a bit, and then I might do another book. I've got another one, but if you're interested. Bum ba da, ba da da ding. Oh, good lord! What's going on in the world right now? Oh, you can be fin shamed now. What? Oh, right. I have no idea. Right. So now, what is the worst posting someone get posted to in the Age of Sail? Kind of as a punishment for breaking the first Sea Lord's daughter's heart. Well, if you want them to die a very painful death, probably from dysentery, you probably send them off to Africa or possibly the Far East. And I mean the far, far East. If you want them to freeze themselves to death, you send them off as part of the crew escorting the whalers to Iceland, etc., because they will get frozen in ice and have a really, really nasty time. And yeah, there are a few fun things they could do. And of course, there's always a duel, but there's other ways of getting rid of someone who's annoying them. Admirals don't tend to duel, they have a fleet. And look, I recall into the early mid-70s in the years that cancer deaths were considered somewhat taboo. Often this is prolonged illness in obituaries. Where is... I'm presuming Freeman's on duty. I'm presuming Dan's off doing his medical stuff. And British did like to send people off to the northern parts of Canada as well. That's always a good place to send them. Somewhere cold. Consequence, far east, meaning like the Pacific Controls? Yeah, pretty much. Somewhere where the likelihood of them getting home in one piece was very low. Graham Hanna, yes, but a duel where one pistol didn't get loaded. No, you always load the pistol. Whether it's loaded with a lead ball or a paperweight or a piece of paper is a different matter. Posting to the Fever Islands, that was always a popular one. There's a lot of interesting postings of where to send people. There's options. It's always good to have options. Naval officers like options for where to send people. It works out well that way. I don't know. So have you found discussion on leadership so far this evening? It's always an interesting one to get into because everyone is a different human being, is different. As much as I said earlier about education. So, for example, as I was saying, the best you can find is an 80% solution for you. So you want to have a variety of 80% solutions available. It's the same leadership styles. There are people who lead by not being by actually having subordinates do the leadership. They might be very good at managers and organizing things, etc., but they're not good at doing the whole "come on, follow me, lads" sort of thing, or we can keep going, team. We can do it. And if you think about it, those leaders, if you are an honest leader and you're in charge and you can admit you're not necessarily the best at that, then it's a leadership skill to be able to identify people who do have that skill and can work with you as your subordinate. And that is what I tend to try and teach people. A good form of leader, a important facet of leadership is building a leadership team. And at lower levels in an organization, that can be a very ad hoc structure. That can be, what personalities do you work with best? Who do you work with? I have preference in terms of people who I work with. I am quite an active and involved person whenever I'm organizing and running something. I realize this. If I need to be able to take a step back from things and do the strategic thinking, then I need other people who I can rely on to take that lead while I'm taking the time to take a step back. So I tend to look in organizations for people who have a similar desire to take step forwards and get involved in things. So I can train them up or work with them if they're, and make sure they're ready to go. I like people who think on the feet and will think for themselves because I can react. But that's my leadership style. I can think of things on the foot. Not everyone has that same skill set. That's not a bad thing or a good thing. That's a different style of leadership. If you are someone who is slightly more slow and methodical in your terms of your approach and thinking things, and you're not as happy or comfortable, let's say, with acting in a moment and from the information you have available, then you probably want a team which is also going to be slightly slower so they can work with your pace. And again, that's something you have to think about in leadership. You have to think about the team you build. You not only have to think about the leadership you give of the wider group you're in charge of and what they're doing, but you have to think about the leadership of the team you're leading. And every single layer has a different thing. It's kind of like, if you've ever seen the diagram, which they ask you how many triangles are in this picture, and it's a sort of one big triangle. And it's got another couple of lines down there and a couple of lines across there. And it's how many triangles are in there. And it's 18 is the actual number. But that's the reality. You have one leadership triangle, theoretically. But actually within that, there's a lot of sub-triangles going on. And leadership sort of needs to be applied differently at all different levels. So anyway, they didn't have to think about them for at least 8 months, so best results. Didn't have to think about them for at least 2 years will be best results. Paul Westwick, I imagine posting to the Falklands or New Zealand's mailship would be interesting. Yep. Comments, options and leadership. It's always nice to float options of punishment. It tends to make people's imagination work in your favour, so maybe you do not have to resort to actual punishment. I have to admit, I do sometimes try that. Let's put it this way. I don't like to lead with that, but I usually have to state the case quite firmly, because then you can afford to be quite nice. If people know what the consequences are, they know what the gradation is. And that's usually what I try and make aware to not when I'm leading as in leading teams of adults, but when I'm in charge of groups of under 18s, even 18-year-old students. I tend to have to make sort of the case, this is what the rules are. So we can do everything fun, but you will know the rules from the get-go and what the options are. But I don't like doing it that way. I like to lead through fun more than anything when I'm dealing with younger people. It tends to work better. That's it. Under your treaty, how did the British make Wales the best she can be? Wales? Prince of Wales. HMS Prince of Wales. We'll see. How do I grow Hood and Repulse to make them better, given the case of Hood, you're dealing with a ship that frankly cannot be fully sorted out due to limitation of flawed design. Well, as I sort of said, that could get replaced. That's the whole point of making an 18-year system. Stuart Quinn, sorry, I just ordered the last copy of Sailor's Odyssey from Amazon. Most more apparently are on the way. Good to hear. Sure, a lot of famous officers first earned the respect of their troops by making sure they were fed and paid well rather than some great feat of courage. Does work well, that one. Graham Hallam, in military terms, strategic and tactical leadership can be very different skill sets. Yep. That's good. Also, different leaderships are better for different positions. You don't want someone who quickly decides things, overseeing all logistics, but good for local logistics. Senator, in Model 2, which name had the best food? Well, I do know that there was a running option of swapping ice cream for beer between Royal Navy and US Navy ships, so I'd say the Allied Navies probably had the better food. But the thing is, they probably had the better food when they were operating together, because the British had ice cream and the Americans had beer. And the British took whole brewing ships with them, so, you know, the British were very, very serious about their beer supply, and the Americans were very, very serious about our ice cream supply. Sean Graham, interesting. Just had a leadership discussion with a friend I work with on Ukrainian support efforts, and found, unfortunately, right now it's a bit of an ego war with the leadership of the groups around here. Yeah, at which point you need someone who's skilled at managing managing up as well as managing down inside your organization. That's a key skill set, and if you do have someone who's capable of managing up and managing down, they are very, very useful to that organization and worth their weight in gold. And a good CEO in a company and a good officer in the armed forces will work out very quickly. Oh, yeah. You're good at making sure you can balance your leaders' egos and your subordinates' egos. We like you, you're smart. We'll deploy you appropriately. The rest of every other navy, especially Axis. You guys have what? Yeah. The British had whole brewing ships. We took mobile breweries with us. They were important. How else were we going to keep the British Pacific Fleet supplied with enough beer? I recently bought the book on the RAF Maritime Patrol Aircraft Project post-World War II. Would it be fair to call the Shackleton replacement contest fixed? I wouldn't say so much fixed as maybe a little bit preordained. Not fixed, but delivered from on high. For Westwick, is it too soon for a new HMS Hood? Possibly. Yeah, after the merger, part of the deal was Douglas's board basically took over Boeing. Yeah, that didn't turn out that well. Durscott, having your own brewing ships also means the leadership controls the strength and quality of the control of the beer. Yeah, that's true. Johnson, isn't the RNRCN dry now as well? Not the Royal Navy. Stafford. Nicest way. The British government like being able to claim they're still in charge of the country. If you turn around to any section of the British Armed Forces and you told them they had to go completely dry, there is the whole drinking and getting massively drunk culture has many years since passed in the Royal Navy officially. It's it's more in moderation these days, of course, but Getting the alcohol off the ships completely? No. 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 There are whole pubs on HMS Prince of Wales and HMS Queen Elizabeth. Whole pubs. At this point, we suddenly hear silence from Stafford as he's suddenly filling out application for the Royal Navy, going, yes, 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 everything. I want to travel the world with a pub. Sean, was there a ratings patch or patch for brewers working on the ships? I've never been quite sure if they hired in contractors or they actually gave them actual naval commissions. Robert isn't. Douglas, I know how you often reference a Sailor's Odyssey, but aren't most memoirs to one degree or another inherently biased? Yes, there's always a bias in them, but the thing is, it's... How do I put this? Okay. There's a bias as in trying to absolutely manipulate events to reflect your what's best for you, and there's the bias as in remembering it from your perspective. The remembering it from your perspective is a de rigueur. So as long as you adjust for that, it's usually okay. However, if you adjust for that and it still doesn't fit with the reality as is backed up by documents, etc., then that's a complete that's a complete reimagining of events. So you always have to put the biographies in a context, and I tend to be very careful. The biographies I tend to put and discuss on here are the biographies which I can rely on are as close to reality and the truth as physically possible. I mean, Stafford really has gone quiet since he got an answer to that question. He's disappeared completely. He's doing an application, isn't he? I was joking about it, but he is off doing an application now. That's good. All the policies that management used to run in McDonnell Douglas in the ground were carried over through to Boeing. Effectively, Boeing paid for McDonnell Douglas's hostile takeover of Boeing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sean Clearly, find the British drinking culture works better than it would for the US. Seems that the British are more social, talkative drinkers overall, whereas we are more guzzle until zombified drinkers. I'm not sure. Officially, nice. Well, maybe I was on considering it. I do enjoy considering. I'm not sure the RN is ready for me. Okay. So, Stafford, why did you think the US Marines who served on HMS wanted to say? Why do you think it's turned into an absolute... It's gone from being the posting which the US Marines were not sure how they were going to make their people do over to having where the US Navy is actually turning around going, so do any of your squadrons actually want to serve on our carriers, or are they all trying to serve on the Brit carriers? And the US Marines are going, let's put it this way. If the Royal Navy asked for it, we could probably provide them with enough aircraft and crews to provide full air wings for both their aircraft carriers right now. Really? Yeah, there are that many campaigning for the volunteering on it. But 960, why did no one foresee that the size of Hood's engines and concerns about using submerged launchers at that speed Hood could do would make adding more submerged torpedo tubes impossible? Because people don't like to do the thinking things through work. They work in their own section, and you're basically relying on the person at the top putting it all together. And I'm actually wanting to have the argument. Sean, quickly, I invite you to join me walking around Manchester city centre on a Friday night or Saturday night. Actually, this is something we have in the UK, which are not. I think we have there are in other countries, but we have things called street angels, who are usually quite often volunteers, but they're usually organised by the local religious groups, local churches, etc. Put them together, and there's a few which I know which are organised by Sikh temples, and I think they call them a different name. But there are a few which are organised by mosques as well, which go around in the evenings and make sure drunk people can get home safely. And I've done some evenings out with them, volunteering and assisting, and it's a good thing, but it does teach you a lot about some of the drinking culture. Nice again. If the British acquired the HS 1202, do they even need to develop the Eurofighter? That's the $46 million question. I just fancy picking a figure. Basically, if you already have a decent fighter that's your own fighter, do you develop the Eurofighter, or does it become the basis for the Eurofighter? So, 1, not enough ships. 2, at 33, I'm a little old for midshipman. Try a direct commission to lieutenant. Getty Images have some stock photos of French Navy galleys serving dinner. Definitely a container for tastiest food. Yes, but they didn't actually spend much time fighting in World War II. Guardian Angels started on New York subways to deter crime in the early 80s, I think. If the VTOL development wasn't cut short and the Harrier was developed into the supersonic variant like planned, then the Falklands is a different ballgame. Then the Falklands becomes an absolute, bloodbath for the Argentinians. Because you have the fact the Argentinians up the end of their range, so they can't use the full amount of their fuel. They're at they have to go all the way home to rearm and refuel, whereas the British will be a case of boom out, engage, back to carrier, rearm, reload, refuel, boom out again. Ouch. Stafford? That's good. If they develop the HS1 and 1202, do they get enough foreign orders to make the project financially viable? The odds are if the British develop the 1202 and get that working, the US would want that over the Harrier. Because let's be honest, the 1202 would be a cool thing. And let me just get a picture of it. And this is the thing I usually do is I usually sit between a picture of beneath the picture of the 1202 when I'm at Kingston University in the Roehampton Vale campus. Yeah, let's see. Can I get a decent picture of it? It's basically a sort of... Come on, find a decent picture. But no, if you have the 1202 or the... Oh, where is it? The 1154? Yeah, the 1154. You probably... The Eurofighter becomes slightly more difficult to put in. The 1154 is especially interesting. So I'm trying to get one of the 1154s and one of the other pictures available, but let's see if I can. Da-da-da-da. Image file. Basically, I'm having to nick something. And hopefully it comes out in... Ah, yes, there's the 1154 as configured for the Royal Navy, which would have been the supersonic Harrier, basically. And... And... HS 1202. Add source. File. Yeah, there you go. Okay, hopefully that's working, he says. But as you can see, basically this looks like some sort of F-16-ish aircraft, which it still does have the way you would structure a... If you had Cadabar carriers, it is designed in a way where you could make it into a Cadabar frame. It's the right way around, sort of thing. There are some differences within the F-16. So basically, this would have been the supersonic Harrier, which if you'd had the supersonic Harrier, it would have been almost like a forerunner for the Joint Strike Fighter for the British, in that it would probably have provided for quite a lot of the aircraft needs. So it's attempting whether or not the GR versions of the Tornado would have been developed. They probably still would have been, but possibly might not have been if this had been in service. It would have certainly been their options. And this would have been the other option that could have been pursued if the Royal Navy had maintained Cadabar carriers. This could have been a model of what could have been sort of something similar to this, could have been in service with the RN instead of an F-18. Although I do think it would have probably been an F-18. Grandma, Guardian Angels, Street Angels, different thing. They tried Guardian Angels here and it didn't work. Yeah. It's a slightly different thing. Street Angels are more coaching, helping, coffee supplies. But if there are super Harriers, do Argentines invade at all? Depends on what kind of carrier you've got. But also, again, if you've got supersonic Harriers like this, you've probably got... Your Invincibles are going to be bigger ships. They're going to be 30 to 35,000 tons because they're going to need some more space. That's good. The problem with getting foreign orders for the US or Europe is other countries want to fund their own aviation industry and development. That's true. That is true. Basically, you have to design something that comes in an F variant you're prepared to sell to people around the world in places other than Europe and other than America. That's where you're going to get your bulk orders. You have to be prepared to sell to India. You have to, and they're now developing their own industry, and that's basically your trouble. And that's the problem with getting ship orders and all sorts of things. People want to build their own industry. To be fair, the 1154 could probably also get the twin tail route. In fact, the 1154 could probably end up with sort of, this is going to sound strange, but almost four tail. Instead of having one central, could end up with four tails sort of approach. Although probably two would be like that, and two would be like that. That's right. If HS 1202 is got by the aircraft and Tornado basically dies, because there is no point buying the Tornado. They're cool aircraft, though. The point that you should always think with aircraft and ship design is that it's often the aircraft will look similar, but it's not the big things which are different. It's the small things which make for the difference between doctrine and operation and how you approach your aircraft. So, if I was going to be talking about leadership styles, there's the way you'd lead a British unit versus the way you'd lead an American unit versus the way you'd lead a Canadian unit versus the way you'd lead an Australian unit. They're all English. They're all, broadly speaking, usually using English for their command structure. And I say broadly speaking, using English, because honestly, there are 3 of those countries which definitely use English, and there is one which uses variants of English. Having worked with the British Army and Royal Marines and various other parts of the British forces, I would say variants on English is definitely the version of them, because in my experience, the Americans, Canadians, and Australians tend to try and use perfect English, or at least their perfect version of English, whereas the regional dialects can become very strong in certain units, which is fun. And the units will have their own subvariant of that regional dialect, which can lead to a tremendous joy on the radio, which I have to admit is usually, to me, it makes the British forces even stronger when it comes to people trying to figure out what exactly they are saying on the radio net. Because I've honestly looked at officers from other countries listening into the radio chatter, and they're going, "Are you sure they're speaking English?" "Yeah, they are." "Are you sure?" "Yes, it's the Yorkshire variant of English." "You sure?" "Yes, it's English." "Positive?" "Yes, it is English." "I recognise that word." "Good." It's kind of like, if you've ever seen the scene in the Avengers, in the first Avengers movie, where Fury says, "has turned 2 of the sharpest men I know into his own personal flying monkeys," and Steve Rogers goes, "I got that reference." That's what it's like watching their faces on the radio, listening to the radio. So yeah, fun times. But it's the small changes in things which make up for a big difference. The way the British approached the light strike fighter, people were saying, well, that looks like a cross between F-16 and F-18, because that's what fits the British sort of style. We wanted something which we could produce to sort of the F-16 level of numbers in proportion to our needs, but which was capable of dealing with some of the rough landings and the style of operations which the F-18 goes through. And then there's this one, which is... this one just looks like a Harrier on steroids, but it is gorgeous. Merchants, just quickly on Catabar carriers past the 70s with investments in the 60s. Hawkeye looks likely, and I believe were the preferred by the Army over the P-39. With that said, do you think Hawkeyes would have likely been likely in the Maltas with enlarging deck lists? I think Hawkeyes are a couple of feet too big. Well, if I remember correctly, the Maltas did have a deck age lift. Yeah, the Maltas have a deck age lift, which means you can expand it to an extent more than you have to cut some stuff in the side, etc. But you can do something with it. So yeah, that would have been possible. A couple of deck edge lifts, actually. Interesting looking ships. I like the multi-class. And honestly, if they'd gone for the full conversion into a angled flight deck carrier, which they probably would have done, then the odds are the multi-class ends up with bigger lifts as part of that anyway. And they probably lose their centre-lined lifts as part of that. Probably gain a third deck edge lift port side. I don't know. Starboard side. Port left. Starboard right, yeah. I was trying to overthink that. And yeah, it would probably be, yeah, they'd have gained a third lift starboard side. Now, with that in mind, would there be more reason to back and build P139s? Potentially. But I think that, as I said, I think you get the Hawkeyes. Because, as I said, I think the year would find a way. If necessary, the British would probably make a modification to the Hawkeyes. I think the problem would have... I think possibly they could have still fitted them. Deck edge lifts, again, you can make modifications to. It's not always good, but you can probably adapt things with a little bit of ballast and a little bit of working out. John Clarke, Desert Squad, have to admit, I do enjoy it back in the 90s, especially living in a state with 21 drinking age that had a bridge to a county that had an age of 19. Ooh. Country that had an age of 19. Desert Squad, get scouts to talk to each other over the radio. Would be like Navajo Code and Oscars. Oh, that is fun. Honestly, when you have a pair of scousers on either side of the radio talking away, and you're just watching the faces, and they're just going, yeah, we have no idea what you're talking about. And you're going, nope. Fine. Or, you can get really posh. That also can confuse them. You can say, oh, boy, right then. Yes, would you mind, please, proceeding forward with that advancement we discussed earlier? It would seem that it would be an opportune moment for a rendezvous a la the restaurant. And you just start talking like that, and they're going, what the frick? This is not proper. This is not proper radio discipline. No, but can any of you understand what I'm saying? Not a foggiest. Good. It is not the confusion in leadership communication types not exemplified by glosses in Korea. Well, it was exemplified by the fact that the Americans couldn't understand that the British were about to be overrun because of the way the British were phrasing it. The Americans were going, it sounds fine, and the British staffers were going, send everything, they're about to be overrun! It was an interesting point in time. South London. Mum and I moved 400 kilometres and everyone keeps saying they love our accents. Yep. Listen, how did the Iron cover up the theft, cockroach invested, rampant corrosion going on, tuberculosis outbreaks, and poor living conditions of War Hood? Because honestly, there was a war coming, and it didn't. Compared to some of the other things that was still floating, it didn't look that bad at that point. So anyway, what does it mean when someone says a ship was paid off? That means it's taken out of commission. That doesn't mean it's necessarily sold off. That means it's taken out of commission. Often put in reserve or put in long refit. So it's not before it could come back into service. It has to be recommissioned into the service. It basically puts it down another level of readiness. If it's commissioned but in still going through refit, that means it's in a refit which you can be called out of to actually operate active operations. When you're paid off, you can't be called back to operate active operations. Did Centerline lists provide any major benefits? I have a friend engaging strategy who's going to hate me at this point because, in their view, Centerline lifts offer no benefits. Centerline lifts, to me, offer the benefit in that they experience the least movement of any part of the ship. Because you think if the ship's doing that, the width which moves to the least is the center, which sort of stays. So yeah, they do offer some advantages when you're maneuvering aircraft. I would say it's more of an advantage when you're maneuvering aircraft by hand than when you're maneuvering aircraft with actual vehicles and using that stuff. So yeah, it's complicated, but there is some advantages. But honestly, the easiest way to improve the armoured carriers and make sure they had more space and etc. on their existing tonnage and Ark Royal and give it more space for its aircraft, etc., would have been to have moved some of the lists at least to deck edge. And honestly, the armoured carriers, especially if they'd been deck edge lifts, it would have just made life so much easier. The question is whether they'd have put one starboard and one port, or whether they put them both one side. My strong suspicion is that they'd have probably put them both port side to balance the island structure on the starboard. Imagine radio code in Cockney. Oh, Cockney rhyming slang converted to radio code. Yeah, that's been known to cause trouble. And especially when you see the American slaves going, why did he just say up the apples and pears? Well, he's going up the stairs. But we're outside, we're not in a building, there are no stairs. I think that probably means he's going up the hill. Oh. Oh no, what's a Scouser? Liverpool. Yeah, Geordie's Newcastle. Scousers Liverpool. Plastic Scousers are people from the Wirral. Although you can't really get away with saying that unless you are with someone from the Wirral or that, and they say it. Yeah. That's good. I've met 18-year-old Americans who come to the uni in the UK. They get multiple educations. The first is what the night out really consists of. There is actually someone I follow on Instagram who is entirely about that. And the reason I follow them is because they sum up the experience for most of my American students when they come to the UK. And it's useful. It reminds me what it's like for them. Thank you, Night Heron Productions. South Johnson. British field report is like a weather report. Chance of a few showers, 35 millimetres of rain, with a brisk wind, 85 kilometre gusts, and mild overcast, 1 hour of sunlight. Yes, to extent. Sean Gregory, Dirt Squad. Parents immigrated in '68 from Glasgow. I also have Canadian cousins. Tend to clear the calendar when they come over. They're getting to that age when we are slowing down quite a bit. Seneca, enemy knows English, enemy doesn't know English accents, or the regional dialects. If you want to have real fun, you have a Cornish regiment, and there are a few examples of Cornish regiments in World War II on the radio, where honestly the radio transmissions were going on, and there are reports from Allied units going, we think they must be. We think some of the enemy forces have captured Allied radio sets because of these transmissions. Going, nope, they're speaking Cornish. Nice 631. How reasonable is it to conclude that the British acquired AW6 if the British acquired AW681, then the C-130s would never have been bought for the RAF? It's a potential outcome, but it depends. Does anyone else buy it, and does the Britain end up their sole suppliers and supporters? So does it end up going the way of the Nimrod? Where we have a small fleet, we are trying to sustain and support entirely based on our own income. You sure about that? That on the Nimitz and Ford classes, two of the lifts are the same side of the island. I know on the Nimitz and the Ford classes are, but if you look at the Maltas and you look at the other British early attempts in that period to where they put the where they put the deck edge lifts, they always tend to design them and put them onto the other side from the island structure to balance the weight. So that's what I'm basing on. The contemporary designs at the period when the British do the design tend to put them on that side. David Cook, just use Welsh. As someone who now lives in Wales, it is baffling. Welsh is lovely, but agreed, it is an advantage. Any of the Celtic languages can be an advantage. In World War II, there were Scots that fooled the Germans by speaking Gaelic and passed on by. Yeah. You can understand how. It's a skill. Right then. So, they are lovely lovely designs though. And let's go. Let me just find a Malta class design for you all, and then I can show you why. Ba-ba-da-ba. There we go. Now, this is, I have to admit, is someone's adaptation of a Malta class, but it sort of fits the profile of what I'm talking about. Bum. Yeah. There we go. And as you can see, the deck edge lifts are the other side from the island structure. And again, when you look at earlier designs where the RN's considering deck edge lifts, they don't tend to go with them because of... Well, again, it's another thing about protecting the actual hangar. There is the worry that if they are if you have the holes in the side of the hangar, that it will make it too easy a target for ships like cruisers, etc. If they catch a carrier, to fire straight into the hangar. Whereas if they can wrap the hangars in sort of offices and things, they can provide them with protection. So there's that sort of thing going on. Deck edge lifts are appreciated from that angle, but they did look at them, and as I said, going deck edge lifts would have been a major advantage for the armoured carriers especially. I think you would end up with them, broadly speaking, in the positions as you see on the Malta. Yeah. Broadly speaking. Okay, follow up. Those designs for the Salford Island, do those designs have angled flight decks? No. But that's the point. We're talking about the armoured carriers as they were originally built. And if when you're building if you're turning the Malta into an angled flight deck, you are probably doing a complete enough rework of it anyway. As I said, you'd probably get rid of the centerline lifts, so you'd be adding in another lift, and you might go... the British, again, some of the British versions of the angled flight deck were basically building out a massive flight deck, and it depends. If they end up siting a third catapult forward, then probably they end up moving the forward, and I do mean the forward port side lift over to the starboard side, along with a third lift on starboard, another lift on starboard to give them 3 lifts. But if they don't put in that catapult, then they probably don't bother, because it would be quite expensive to move it all and quite complicated to sort of move it around. Mm-hmm. So when I was talking about the armoured carriers, which were pre-World War II design without angled flight decks. So of course, as they were the proper age, not the jet age. So yeah, I don't think those would have had... I think they would have had that style sort of lift structure. Reminds me when H.M.S. Vincent was in Gdynia. I went to ask the lieutenant near the gangway how long tours are still available. The line was long. You expect him to speak words like a human machine gun. That's not unusual. You have to wonder if the UK politicians were being paid not to invest in the UK's aerospace sector when we had viable homegrown options. Yeah. They were... How do I put this politely? You have to remember, when you're being advised by the best economists of the time, it's what are the economists tea leaves they're reading, and economists tend to be reading things which... Let's put it this way. They don't necessarily think about the same factors you or I might think about. I love economists. I work with enough of them. But they don't think in terms of the same terms. They think in their best security of a country and their best defence is a strong economy. And that's definitely the mantra that comes from the Treasury, etc. Your best defence against any problems is a strong economy. And I can agree with that, but I would say, as we've shown recently in the COVID disaster and various other things, having a level of industrial independence in key sectors is a very critical skill as well. And I think I think quite a lot of Western nations need to start realizing that and building up that. And I consider that patriotism to an extent, but also I consider that not patriotism, but as in sensible. I would like a stronger space sector for the UK, and I'd like a stronger defence sector in terms of procurement. I'd like the ability. I don't necessarily think we need to build a lot more things in peacetime than we are building, but I think we need to build enough to justify maintaining the capability to build more surge capacity if we need it. So if the Iron got the Maltas, how long until they build an 80,000-ton supercarrier? Depends on how the world worked. Depends how long they're in service for. If they get the Maltas into service, which will probably be in the 1950s, as angled flight decks, in the nicest way, those would be in service at least till the 1980s, if not even the 1990s. At which point, because they'd be contemporaries of the Midways. So, at which point it'd be what was the decision made in the defense reviews in the late 1980s, early 1990s about carrier power? So, what about a deck-edge loft built out of thin armor plate which can fold vertical to provide the protection from both seas and enemy fire? What about a deck-edge lift built out of thin armor plate which can fold? The trouble is, once it's folded up, it takes time to fold it down. Then you have to move aircraft. It's adding extra complication. The British were looking at it, and in the end, were coming up with the idea of shutters, armored shutters they could pull in across. I never thought about lift, but when lifting from hangar to flight deck, did munitions and aircraft use the same lifts? Well, the British tended to arm theirs up in the hangar. The British either armed them. If they were taking armaments up to the flight deck, no, they tended to have their own lifts for the ammunition. If they were arming up in the hangar, of course, then the aircraft would go up armed. And certain things they would do in the hangar. Torpedoes, etc., they tended to fit in the hangar, and then they take their safeties off once they're in the flight deck. Would you build the Maltas with an angled deck? Do you go out to the edge of those deck edge lifts, or enlarge them and have them make the deck even wider? A bit of both, probably. Vision, on space, you need to talk to the angry astronaut. He's a big fan of UK space products. We do quite well. If you want to see a very good space company, Sorry Satellites is an excellent one. I know. Dr. Clarke, did the UK just approve the sale of last chip foundries to the Chinese? I don't think we did, but I don't know. I haven't actually been watching that news. I've been dealing with other things. That's what I was saying. Lifts on Malta. One lift starboard in place of a two-engine plane behind the AA turrets. One lift the antenna. One between the antennas back starboard. One port side in place to the rear port when it's located, or move back a bit. Possibly. So I was hoping they'd have kept the fire figure spurred along with Van and Nimitz rolling out, keeping pace would have meant more. Potentially they would have. It depends on what the British decide to do. If the British decide that they're going... Let's put it this way. If the British have large strike carriers, and they're in the strike carrier club, and they're in the big carrier club, and it's part of their global presence in the world, then when the French get a nuclear carrier, the British will want a nuclear carrier. So that means probably about the time as Charles de Gaulle, the British will start building nuclear carriers. Okay. Okay, I don't know. Okay, I don't know. Right, Nathan Cook. Assuming we have the Maltas, how does it affect the Falklands campaign? Well, if Argentina chose to launch it, then that would be Armageddon for Argentina in terms of the forces, because in the nicest way, fixed-wing carriers and probably a pair of them down in the Falkland Islands would provide a quantum leap in combat air support and airborne early warning, which would mean most of those attacks which we lost ships to would be intercepted a long way before they reached Falklands. It would push the air battle back from being over the Falklands to about 50 to 100 miles west of the Falklands. So the battles will be taking place over the ocean between the Falklands and so the Argentinians wouldn't have air support at all. There would probably they'd have had full night capable aircraft as well as night and day capability of aircraft. So that means there would be bombs raining down on the Argentinians all day, every day, and at night. The Argentinians would have had any air support. The British land forces would have had on-call air support that could drop bombs on call and would be quick enough to get there wherever it was needed. So you probably in scenario Goose Green, etc., you might well not have H. Jones thinking he has to lead his own personal unit. Instead, he could call up fire support and go, "There's a unit which my artillery you can't seem to reach, and da 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 da. Can you come in and blast them?" Boom, bye bye, and that sort of thing. So it would have been a completely different operation if they'd had those, because they're a completely different capability. Looking at that against all odds at the angle deck, Malta has kept a set line live like Audacious and Victorious class. You see, the problem is Audacious and Victorious are being converted after they've been built. The Maltas are at an earlier stage in their production. So if you're building them from scratch, why would you keep the center line lifts if you're going to go straight with an angled flight deck? If you're going straight to an angled flight deck and you're basically just taking you've only got the ships level below the hangar level, below the hangar, you can remove those centerline lifts and get a lot of space in your hangar for the larger aircraft and have increased deck edge lifts, and that's what I think they would do. Sure, but if the French get a nuclear ion carrier, the British will get not one, the British will get more than one. Probably get 3. Because the British will go, the French have got 1. They're such dilettantes. We will build an entire class! 3! Probably they'll announce they're ordering 4 to replace the Malta's 1 for 1, and then they'll actually take delivery of 3. That's good. Will the British have conducted strikes on Argentine mainland air bases if they have a pair of Maltas? Probably not, because that would widen the war and could lose them the support of the Americans, and that's a political decision. But they would certainly be taking down the Argentinian aircraft as soon as they broke the 100-mile barrier around the Falklands that could be maintained with, especially with Hawkeyes and Phantoms. Stafford, thank you. Did you see the plan 003 and Gerard 4 tweet attack Belgium's in on Friday? It would be quite cool. Sean Quigley, Graham Handler, has a study ever been done to see how much Gaelic has in common with Arabic, Hebrew, and other Semitic languages? I wonder if they didn't have a common root language. Not really sure. But there are a few common linguistics going around, and you have to remember that the Gauls were forcibly resettled by several Gaul tribes were forcibly resettled by the Romans in modern Iran. Well, in what territory is now modern Iran. Business vision. What if Argentina had 2 carriers instead of a cruiser during the Falklands War? It would have been problematic. But there again, they'd have had to sustain them. How would Habadak do in the Falklands? Interesting. It would be massive. Stromac, has a Bright Spark ever drawn up plans for a carrier 2-angle flight gas? There is several plans out there, including one which was a twin-hulled aircraft carrier which has angled flight decks off both sides. Right then. I'm going to say it's almost at 10 o'clock, so I'm going to carry this on till 10 and keep answering questions till 10. But then I'm going to go because I have to go and record a podcast because later this evening, and the podcast is because it's 10 years since the beginning of the SimSec podcast series, and I was in some of the first ever podcasts for SimSec, chatting away, and I've been invited to a reunion. So we've got to do. Oh, we're doing that. That's one of the reasons why we haven't sort of arranged things for Billtrons till we get back, because I'm doing so many other things at the moment, and so is Jamie. But we are going to start arranging something. We are. Vision, you've been a member for 11 months. Thank you. Considering a deck edge lift has to have a hangar door that a missile can fly through and get into the hangar, causing big trouble. Could always be fun. Thank you, Sage. Alfredo, what is the most glaring missing capability in the RN currently? I'd say enough large flight decks and anti-ship capability and enough submarines. We also need escort numbers. Basically, it's numbers of everything is the big glaring deficiency. But yeah, if I'm going to pick something, I'd like Albion and Bulwark to have been LHDs, and I'd like enough F-35s and anti-ship capability, because what our anti-ship capability is supposed to be our strike aircraft and our submarines, and we don't have enough of either. So, in nicest way, we need strike capability on our ships, and we don't have enough of that either. Ian Winter, do you think there is a place for a cruiser with a decent armament in the current Navy world? I'm fairly certain that's what a Type 83 is going to be. It's going to be called a destroyer, but it'll be a cruiser in everything but name. Sean quickly, Graham Hamlet. We were all Glasgow Irish, so never really heard it spoken regularly, and have to get back into the study of it all. All I remember is 100,000 welcomes right now. I presume that's something to do with Gaelic, which is a discussion going on. Most of the Scottish nobility spoke French and considered themselves French right up into the 1400s, so I'd not be surprised with a language link. Yeah. They were interesting, the Scottish nobility. They really were. It's one of the interesting things. When did the deck edge lifts become proven, Knight 681? Well, that's an interesting question. Because you could argue they were proven by the Americans quite early on, and that, frankly, the British were very slow in adopting them. But you could also argue the British were being conservative for a reason, and they felt they had to be conservative because they had so much to risk. It's the Mediterranean, and that's the big argument against decade lifts. If you're dealing with just the operations for the Far East, then it's the interesting thing is, okay, the amount of times I get told by people armored carriers are a response to the Mediterranean, and I go, no, but functions of the armored carrier design is a product of the Mediterranean. And one of those is the decade lifts. It's the fear of what the enemy will do diving in at you. But if they'd been building an armored carrier for the Far East, it would have still had armor, because the British would want it survivable, because for the British fighting in the Far East, what happens if your carrier's damaged? If it's damaged badly, it has to go all the way back to Britain to be repaired, or you have to build a new one. That's a long way away. So you want a repairable, survivable ship for the Far East, which is another reason to go for armor. Mediterranean is the reason you go for the fully enclosed armor with the centerline lifts. Vision, will the Type 83 have lavish wood paneling, pianos, wallpaper like Russian ships? Probably not the piano. Well, maybe the piano. The British do like a piano. Usually it's an upright piano, not a fancy piano, but sometimes they have piano on their ships. I think there might be one in one of the pubs on one of the carriers. And although I might be wrong in that, it might have been a discussion there if there was going to be one. But there's usually a few other things. Wood paneling is de rigueur, and piano. You need certain things. It's going to sound terrible, but you need certain things because these ships are also your diplomatic embassies when you go around. If they look tatty and they look just slabs of grey, then people don't tend to think that you've done really well. The Royal Router. The question will maybe a bit too contentious, but do you think the Ukrainians will make another attempt to sink a major Russian ship? I think they're always making attempts to sink a major Russian ship. Yes, I think this one worked, but honestly, I think they'll take any chance they can get. Because this is not the first attempt of theirs. It's not. Remember, they sank they attacked the landing ships, and various other things. They're going to make attempts. They're going to. Because they have to. The more they can crank up the cost of the war for the Russians, the harder and harder they make it for the Russians to actually fight it. And good night, Dr. Clarke. Sorry for all the Malta questions. It wouldn't make me scream. I'm building a scratch build of that carrier, and I want it as good as possible on the first try. Thank you. Have a good evening, and have a good time on the Reunion podcast. It should be fun. Sean Quigley, Odyssey, with the constant expansion in tonnages, where exactly is the dividing line between the destroyer and cruiser now? More anti-air than anti-sub? Basically, cruiser means general purpose. And is all round for everything. But there again, that's the problem once you start looking at the Zumwalts and the Arleigh Burkes, and you go, are you really destroyers or are you cruisers? Because basically now, destroyer has come to mean large escort, frigate, smaller escort. And frigates ASW orientated, destroyers airborne AAW orientated, but no destroyer is really entirely AAW. It has to have an anti-submarine warfare capability. And no frigate is entirely ASW orientated. It has to have an anti-air warfare capability. So they're all cruisers. And I argue sometimes that actually what we have is a world of light cruisers, which are anti-submarine warfare orientated, and heavy cruisers, which are AA warfare orientated. Mainly because of the size of radars versus the size of towed arrays. Going on, using a deck edge lift in the North Sea would have been interesting. It could have been interesting, but I think the Ark Royal would have been high enough, and I think the armoured carriers would have been high enough. It would have been okay. Will do. Thank you, Stafford. I'll think about that one. Fishman, I really liked the interiors of Russian cruiser destroyers, but the decor may have been a contributing factor. Today in Japan, some really lavish trains have fireproof resistant faux woodwork. Yeah, they are interesting, the Japanese trains. Right. thank you very much, everyone. Ay, caramba. Ooh. I'm going to swap and swap. Bam. Ba-dum. Thank you, everyone. And, well, yeah. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. And thank you. Thank you for all the super chats. Thank you for all the friendship. Thank you for all the conversation. Thank you for all the questions. Thank you for bringing a great audience. And thank you for the patrons. And thank you to everyone else as well. The support is really, really kind of you. Thank you. And while I remember, good night, Dirt Squad. Thank you, Strong Quickly. Thank you, Night 681. Thank you, Stafford, and thank you, Sean, for adminning the chat. Thank you, DG40, Night 6831, Alfie Rowe, Colin Cameron, and for watching. And thank you, Greg Sowski. Thank you, Sean Quigley. Thank you, Colin Cameron. I think I said Colin Cameron. But thank you, everyone. And thank you, Melanie1640. Thank you to Royal Router. It's very nice of you to comment and chat away. Thank you, Ian Winter. Thank you, Sage, Jack Ray, Graham Highlander. Thank you, Albazaski. Thank you, Rapid Razorback. Thank you, Anuk. Thank you, Seneca Nero. Thank you. Oh, basically, thank you, everyone. It's been very fun. It's been a lot of fun, and thank you very much for watching. Take care, and have a nice evening. Don't worry, Night 6 everyone. I'm sure you enjoy what you missed. Take care. And thank you again for everyone for watching.